Section 1. The World Beneath the Surface. There is something about the Pokémon world that never quite lets you go. Even if you haven't picked up a game in years, even if the last time you watched the anime you were curled up on a living room floor with a bowl of cereal balanced on your chest, there is still something that pulls you back. A melody. A half-remembered route name. The faint pixel outline of a town you used to wander through at midnight, when everyone else in the house was asleep. The Pokémon franchise has been with us for close to 30 years now. It started as a pair of games released in Japan in February of 1996, coded by a small team of developers who worked out of a cramped office in Tokyo, and it grew into something that none of them could have fully anticipated. It became the highest-grossing media franchise in the world. It became a word that every child on every continent recognized. It became, for many of us, the first story we ever truly fell into. And yet, for all that recognition, for all that familiarity, the Pokémon world is absolutely riddled with darkness. Not the loud, obvious kind of darkness. Not the kind that announces itself. This is the quiet kind. The kind that lives in the space between dialogue boxes. The kind that hides in Pokédex entries written by a 10-year-old who would never pause to consider what they were actually saying. The kind that lives in the silences between towns, in the conspicuous absence of middle-aged men in Kanto, in the way a rival character shows up at a gravesite and his strongest partner Pokémon is suddenly, inexplicably, gone. People notice these things. Fans, young and old, playing through these games in the dark, started to ask questions, and then they started to answer them. And what they came up with, over years and decades of careful observation, creative thinking, and genuine love for this franchise, is extraordinary. This is a collection of 125 Pokémon conspiracy theories. Some of them are dark, some of them are melancholy, some of them are quietly beautiful, and a few of them are frankly a little unsettling once you sit with them long enough. Some have been very nearly confirmed by the games themselves, nudged toward truth by a Pokédex entry or a piece of background lore that seems almost too deliberate to be coincidental. Others are pure speculation, the kind of ideas that will never be proven or disproven, that will simply live on in the imagination of a fandom that refuses to stop looking for meaning in the corners of these games. All of them are worth exploring. You don't need to do anything right now. Wherever you are, however you found yourself here tonight, you can simply settle in and listen. The theories will come to you gently, one after another, the way thoughts drift when you're lying in that warm middle space between waking and sleep. You don't need to hold on to any of it. You can just let the ideas wash over you, let the worlds unfold behind your eyes, let the familiar music of this franchise play softly in the background of your imagination. Take a slow breath in and let it go. Because we're going to go somewhere quiet tonight. We're going to walk through the long grass, follow old routes through autumn-colored forests, stand on the edge of places where the lore goes deep, and let ourselves wonder. Let's start somewhere that feels comfortable. Let's start at the very beginning before anything strange surfaces, with the world itself. The Pokémon world looks cheerful. That is, on its surface, undeniably true. It is full of color and music and wide-eyed children, setting off on adventures with creatures that love them. Towns have friendly names. Routes smell like grass and ocean air. Every city has a Pokémon center with a kind nurse who never sleeps and never seems to age and is always glad to see you. But spend a little longer in that world. Read more carefully. Listen to what the NPCs aren't saying. Notice what the games don't show you. Notice that the very first person you meet in Pokémon Red and Blue, the very first significant conversation you have, is an old man who tells you it is dangerous to walk in the long grass alone. Not difficult, not challenging, dangerous. Notice that there are no movie theaters in Kanto, no concert halls, no parks filled with families on a Sunday afternoon. The infrastructure of this region is built around two things above all others: Pokémon centers and Pokémon gyms. Healing and fighting, the architecture of a society that has been through something. Notice that when you leave your tiny starting town and walk out into the world, almost every adult male you encounter is either very young, very old, or involved in organized crime. We will come back to all of that. We will walk slowly through the evidence because it deserves to be laid out carefully, the way a good mystery always does. But first, just the feeling of it. The sense that you are playing a children's game that, if you look at it from the right angle in the right light at the right time of night, has the texture of something much older and stranger beneath it. That is the Pokemon conspiracy, all 125 threads of it, and we're only just beginning. Hey, Yad, before we go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is wherever you are. And if you're enjoying this so far, a subscription means you won't miss what's coming next. Now, let's keep going. Section 2, The Great Pokemon War, Kanto's Hidden History Theory number 1. And it is one of the most quietly devastating theories in the entire fandom. There was a war. It sounds almost too simple when you say it like that. A war, in a game about collecting cute monsters. But the evidence for this is not small, and it is not the product of overactive imagination. It is woven into the fabric of Pokemon Red and Blue with a level of deliberateness that, once you start seeing it, is very hard to unsee. Let's walk through it piece by piece, because the theory deserves that kind of attention. You begin Pokemon Red and Blue in Pallet Town, a very small place, just a handful of houses, a research lab, a patch of grass to the north that a very nervous old man will warn you away from. Your character is 10 years old. Your mother is home. Your father is not. This is the first detail. Your father isn't on a journey, isn't mentioned in passing as being at work, isn't referenced in any warm or casual way. He simply does not exist within the narrative. He is an absence shaped like a person. For a game aimed at children, most of whom have 2 living parents, this is a choice. Choices in game design are intentional, and this one is repeated. Your rival, known in most Western versions as Blue, lives next door with his grandfather, Professor Oak. Blue has no parents. They are never mentioned. He is being raised by an elderly man in a small town, and the game never addresses this at all, never treats it as remarkable, never draws attention to it. It is simply the situation. As if the world has normalized the absence of parents. As if the world has been through something that removed a generation of people from the picture. Continue north from Pallet Town and eventually you will reach Vermilion City, home of the 3rd gym. The gym leader there is a man named Lieutenant Surge. He is the only gym leader in the entire Kanto region who holds a military title. He wears what very clearly resembles army fatigues. He speaks in clipped, aggressive sentences. He is large and intimidating and operates his gym like a command post. And he says something to you before the battle begins that the game never returns to, never explains, never develops. He says it and moves on as if it is simply common knowledge. He says, "I tell you, kid, electric Pokemon saved me during the war." The war. Not a war, the war. As if there is only one. As if any person in this world would know exactly which war he meant without further clarification. As if the idea of a Pokemon war is not remarkable at all to the people of Kanto. As if it is simply part of the background of their lives, a shared reference point, something that happened and that everyone who is old enough already knows about. But the player character doesn't know about it, and the game never tells them. And that silence, that single unreturned thread in the narrative, is the seed from which this entire theory grows. Because once you hear Lieutenant Surge say that, you start to look at everything else differently. Look at the population of Kanto. Look carefully at who is present and who is not. The demographic breakdown of the region is, when you think about it, profoundly strange. There are children everywhere. Trainers on every route, many of them young, setting off into the world with their Pokemon. There are elderly characters. Professor Oak, the elderly woman who gives you advice in Lavender Town. The gym leader Blaine, who is older and worn around the edges. There are gym leaders who are adult, but exceptional. Giovanni, Sabrina, Koga, people whose positions set them apart from ordinary civilian life. But middle-aged men who are just living ordinary lives? Fathers of young children? Men in their 30s and 40s with jobs and homes and families? They are extraordinarily rare. The game is conspicuously empty of them, and the explanation the theory offers is simple and cold. Most of them didn't come back. The Great Pokemon War, as fans have come to call it, sometimes called the Kanto War, sometimes the Great War of the Pokemon world, is theorized to have taken place roughly a decade or 15 years before the events of the original games. A conflict between regions, quite possibly between Kanto and Johto, that devastated the adult male population of the area and left behind a generation of children being raised by single mothers and grandparents. Children who grew up in a world where the infrastructure was being slowly rebuilt, where Pokemon centers existed on every corner because they had been built as triage facilities, where the culture of Pokemon battles had developed out of the military use of trained Pokemon during the conflict itself. The Fire Red and Leaf Green remakes added a small additional detail to Lieutenant Surge through the Fame Checker feature. It notes that he was known for being especially careful and cautious during his time in the military. This is cited as the reason he survived when so many others did not. His caution saved him, and what that implies quietly is that many of his fellow soldiers were not so lucky. That the war he survived was the kind where caution made the difference between life and death, where you could be gone in an instant, where no amount of bravery guaranteed you would come home. There are additional threads that weave into this theory with uncomfortable neatness. Kanto, as a region, has almost no entertainment infrastructure. Other regions in the Pokemon world have movie theaters, festivals, places of leisure and community gathering. Kanto has a department store, a game corner, a handful of notable buildings, and mostly gyms and Pokemon centers. The theory suggests that entertainment venues were destroyed during the war and that the region's reconstruction prioritized medical and training infrastructure first. The things you need to survive and fight, the things you rebuild before you rebuild theaters. There are also the underground tunnels, the rock tunnel, the underground paths beneath cities. Fans have noted that some of these seem disproportionately large for simple travel routes. The suggestion is that they were originally built as shelter, as places where civilians could hide during bombardment or invasion. They have been repurposed now for trade and travel, but their scale hints at an older, more desperate function. And then there's Team Rocket. Giovanni's criminal organization holds an astonishing amount of power for a group that is, nominally, just organized crime. They infiltrate a massive corporation, the Sylph Company, right in the middle of one of Kanto's largest cities. They control the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town. They operate out of Celadon City's game corner. Their influence reaches into seemingly every corner of the region, and the police, who are explicitly shown to be present, seem largely unable to stop them. The war theory offers a partial answer, a society that has lost a generation of its adult men, that is rebuilding from trauma, that has its institutional memory disrupted, that is a society with weakened civic structures. Its police force is understaffed. Its government is still recovering its footing. Its people are accustomed to loss and have a somewhat fatalistic relationship with authority. Into that vacuum, organized crime expands. Giovanni himself is a fascinating figure in this context. He is the gym leader of Viridian City, the final gym in the Kanto circuit, who also happens to be the leader of the region's most powerful criminal syndicate. The game presents this as a surprise revelation, but the theory asks a different question. How does a man get to hold both of those positions at the same time without anyone stopping him? How does that happen unless the institutions that would normally prevent it are simply too damaged, too thin, too overwhelmed to act? The answer, the theory suggests, is that the war left Kanto vulnerable in ways it has never fully recovered from. Theory number 2, related to this. Ash's father died in the Pokemon War. In the anime, Ash Ketchum's father is mentioned exactly once in any meaningful way, a brief, vague reference to a man who left on a Pokemon journey and has never come back. His mother, Delia, raises Ash alone. She does not seem bitter about this. She seems, if anything, gently melancholy about it in the way people are melancholy about things they have come to accept as simply the shape of their lives. The theory is that Ash's father was called up during the war, that he fought, possibly alongside Pokémon, his own Pokémon, trained and sent into conflict the way Lieutenant Surge describes, and that he did not come back, that the fiction of him being on a journey is something Delia tells herself and tells Ash because the alternative, the truth of where his father is and why he never came home, is something she has never fully found the words for. This theory also offers a different reading of Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime, the Pokemon that lives in Ash's house and helps Delia with chores, is treated with unusual affection by Ash's mother. Played for laughs in the anime, certainly. But the theory suggests that Mr. Mime's presence in that household is more than coincidence. That Delia, alone in a house in Pallet Town with her son, and no partner, found comfort in the company of a Pokémon that could share the domestic space with her, that could fill some small part of the silence her husband left behind. Theory number 3 in this section. The underground tunnels of Kanto were originally bomb shelters. Walk through the rock tunnel in the dark with only your Pokémon's glow to guide you. Feel how long it is. Feel how deep it goes. Notice that it was carved with purpose, with effort, with the kind of engineering that goes into something you expect to need badly. The theory is that before the war ended, before the reconstruction began, these tunnels were places where the people of Kanto hid, where children were taken when the fighting got close, where families waited in the dark, listening, hoping. Now they are just shortcuts between routes. Trainers wander through them looking for a battle. But the stone remembers its original purpose, the theory suggests. The shape of it says, this was built for survival. Theory number 4. The Pokemon gyms were originally military training facilities. Think about what a gym actually is in structural terms. It is a government-sanctioned facility where citizens are trained in Pokemon battle techniques. It is inspected, certified, organized into a hierarchy. In peacetime, this looks like a sporting and training institution for aspiring trainers. In wartime, it would have looked like exactly what it was. A network of regional training centers, preparing people and their Pokemon for combat. The gym leaders themselves, under this theory, are not simply athletic champions. They are the officers of a military structure that has pivoted to peacetime operation. Their badges are not just symbols of sporting achievement. They were once marks of military readiness, signifiers that a trainer had been evaluated and found capable. Lieutenant Surge, of course, is the most obvious example. But look at the others through this lens. Koga, the poison-type specialist who uses sleep powder and toxic strategies, techniques that translate directly into chemical warfare. Sabrina, who wields psychic Pokemon in ways that could devastate an enemy at range. Blaine, whose fire-type Pokemon would be catastrophically effective in military application. Even Brock and Misty, whose rock and water-type Pokemon have obvious defensive and offensive utility in a conflict. The cheerful framing of the gym challenge, collect all 8 badges, prove yourself worthy, sits over what might be, historically, a very different kind of institution. Theory number 5. Giovanni abandoned the Viridian Gym before your arrival to avoid a battle that would have been too personal. In Pokemon Red and Blue, the 8th gym, Giovanni's gym in Viridian City, is locked when you first arrive. You cannot challenge it until very late in the game, after you have defeated Giovanni in Team Rocket's hideout and watched him disband his criminal empire, at least temporarily. When you finally arrive to challenge the gym, Giovanni is there. He battles you. He loses. And he says something quiet, something almost reflective, before he walks out of the gym and out of the game entirely. He says he has much to think about, and he disappears. The theory is that Giovanni's delay in opening the gym, and his willingness to face you when you finally arrive, is connected to something deeply personal. To a recognition that the child standing in front of him represents something he could not outrun forever. Some versions of this theory connect it to the idea that Giovanni is Ash's, or Red's, father. Others simply suggest that Giovanni, in his own way, was waiting to be defeated, that he needed the encounter to happen, that the war and everything it cost him is present in the room during that final battle, and that when he leaves, he is finally done. Section 3. Ash Ketchum, the coma, the clone, and the boy who never grew up. Now let's turn from the world to the boy at the center of it. Ash Ketchum, 10 years old, has been 10 years old for decades of real-world time, has traveled to more regions than most people can name, has befriended legendary Pokemon that should by any reasonable measure have reshaped the history of the world around him, has formed bonds and said goodbyes and started over more times than anyone should have to. And through all of it has remained stubbornly, unchangingly, impossibly 10. This is the question that opened the door for the most famous and the most melancholy theory in all of Pokemon fandom. Theory number 6. Ash Ketchum has been in a coma since the first episode of the anime. Here is the episode in question. The very first episode. Ash oversleeps and misses the proper time to collect his starter Pokemon from Professor Oak. He ends up with Pikachu, who initially wants nothing to do with him. As they walk together through the roads outside Pallet Town, a flock of Spearow descends on them, drawn by Ash's earlier decision to throw a Pokeball at a wild Pikachu and startle the flock. The Spearow are angry. There are many of them. They dive and they swarm, and they are genuinely, viscerally dangerous. And then lightning comes. Pikachu, in a moment of instinctive defense, unleashes a massive electrical attack into the storm clouds above them. The resulting lightning bolt is enormous. A real bolt, not a game-scaled one, the kind of thing that could stop a heart at close range. Ash is caught in it. And the theory says that when that bolt hits, Ash's heart does stop. That the boy lying in that field in the rain, Pikachu curled up against him, does not survive. Not fully. Not in the way that matters. What follows, all of it, every journey, every gym badge, every legendary encounter, every heartfelt goodbye, is the elaborate dream of a boy in a coma somewhere. A boy whose body is in a hospital while his mind builds an entire world around him. A world shaped by the games he had been playing, by the Pokémon he had been imagining, by the adventure he was so desperate to go on. This, the theory suggests, is why Ash never ages. Because time doesn't pass in dreams the way it does in waking life. Because a child's dreaming mind doesn't know how to age itself, doesn't know how to let the protagonist of its own story grow old. Because the boy creating this world is still 10 and always will be. It explains, too, why Ash is the luckiest trainer who has ever lived. Why every legendary Pokémon seems drawn to him specifically, seems to seek him out, seems to offer him gifts and recognition that no ordinary trainer could ever hope to receive. Because in his dream, he is the protagonist. The world organizes itself around him. Every coincidence bends in his favor because it is his mind bending toward hope. It explains why Team Rocket never succeeds. In a waking world, persistent and intelligent criminals would eventually catch a break. But in a dream, the bad guys always fail because the dreamer won't let them win. They are comic figures, recurring obstacles, antagonists made safe by the dreamer's control over the story. Jessie and James and Meowth are not a threat in any real sense. They are a comfort, a known enemy, a reliable constant in a landscape that keeps shifting. It even explains the Ho-Oh sighting. In the very first episode, the same episode where Ash is struck by lightning, he looks up from the road and sees a magnificent golden bird soaring overhead. He doesn't know what it is. Nobody else seems to see it. But it is there, and it is real to him, and it is described later in the franchise as a Pokémon that carries with it the promise of eternal happiness and the fulfillment of one's deepest desires. The theory suggests that Ash's comatose mind latched onto that image, that the Ho-Oh is the last thing he truly saw before the dream took him, and that its promise of happiness is the reason the dream has been so vivid, so persistent, so full of wonder rather than fear. The version of this theory that is saddest, and perhaps the most compelling, is the one that wonders whether the people in Ash's life know. Whether his mother is beside a hospital bed somewhere, holding his hand, talking to him about Pokémon, hoping. Whether Professor Oak visits. Whether Brock and Misty, his first friends, the companions who are perhaps the clearest projections of the things Ash wanted most. A reliable older brother figure and a sharp, caring girl who believed in him, are real people who knew him before the accident, and who come to see him sometimes and whose voices reach him, faintly, through the dream. Theory number 7. Ash's eternal youth is the wish granted by Ho-Oh. This is a lighter, gentler version of the same question. Ho-Oh, in the lore of the Pokémon world, is a legendary bird Pokémon associated with resurrection, renewal, and the granting of great wishes. Its Pokédex entries across various games describe it as capable of bestowing eternal happiness on those who see it. Ash sees it in the first episode. The theory is that Ho-Oh, in that moment, recognized something in Ash, perhaps his genuine love for Pokémon, perhaps his openness, perhaps simply the fact that he was a child about to be struck by lightning, and granted him something. Not immortality, exactly, but a kind of preserved state. A world in which he could keep going, keep meeting Pokémon, keep building bonds, without the entropy of time wearing him down. A gift of endless beginning. Under this reading, Ash's adventures are not a dream. They are simply the life of a boy who has been, in some quiet way, blessed, who has been allowed to stay in that golden period of childhood adventure longer than anyone was meant to. And eventually, the theory suggests the journey will end, not with age or death, but with a completion, a sense of fullness, a moment when even Ho-Oh's gift is gently lifted and Ash can grow up. Which is, interestingly, not so far from what actually happened in the anime's conclusion. Theory number 8. Ash Ketchum is a clone. This one is darker, and it operates with a cold internal logic that is worth sitting with. The technology to clone Pokémon, and by implication living beings of other kinds, clearly exists in the Pokémon world. The existence of Mewtwo proves it. Dr. Fuji's research, depicted in supplemental materials and referenced in the first movie, involved cloning from genetic material, creating a living being from the cells of another. This technology is real, documented, and demonstrated. So consider this. In that first episode, Ash is struck by lightning. Perhaps he does not survive. Perhaps the electrical surge that Pikachu releases is fatal, or near fatal enough that by the time help arrives, by the time his mother and Professor Oak reach him, it is too late. But it is not entirely too late, because in this world, cloning technology exists. And his mother, devastated, desperate, does what grief-stricken people sometimes do when they have access to things that should not exist. She uses it. Ash is cloned, and the clone, grown from Ash's cells, carried to term, raised as if nothing had happened, wakes up in Pallet Town on the day of his 10th birthday, barely late for his Pokémon. He is identical to Ash in every meaningful way, carrying his memories, his personality, his voice, his love for Pokémon. But he is not quite the original, and the clone does not persist indefinitely. Clones in this theory have a lifespan, roughly 1 year perhaps, which is why, at the end of every series, at the end of every region's story, everything resets. Ash's memories of his companions become hazy. His bonds, so carefully built, seem to slip away. He starts fresh again, with the same sense of wonder he had on day one. Because it is day one again. It always is. The Pikachu he carries with him through all of it is the constant. Pikachu was there when the original Ash was struck down. Pikachu has been there through every clone, every fresh beginning. And Pikachu's fierce loyalty, the emotional depth of that bond that has always seemed almost impossibly strong. The theory says it is the weight of memory. Pikachu remembers all of them, all the Ashes, all the goodbyes that were not really goodbyes because the face always came back, slightly different, equally beloved. Pikachu carries all of them. Theory number 9, the different versions of Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny are explained by the same cloning technology. If you have ever thought about the logistics of the Pokémon world, and if you are watching a video like this, you almost certainly have, you have noticed that Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny are not just similar. They are identical. Every Nurse Joy in every Pokémon Center in every region is the same face, the same voice, the same warm greeting. Every Officer Jenny in every city is the same posture, the same uniform, the same firm expression. The in-show explanation, offered as a gentle joke, is that they are large families with shared genetics. Cousins, all of them, spread throughout the world. Haha, moving on. But the theory offers something more interesting. The Nurse Joy Network and the Officer Jenny Network are, under this reading, institutional cloning programs, large-scale duplication of ideal candidates for their respective roles carried out by whoever administers the systems of the Pokémon world. Nurse Joy, optimized for compassion and medical care, duplicated and distributed to every center. Officer Jenny, optimized for authority and law enforcement, the same. Under the coma theory, of course, this is simply Ash's dreaming mind using the same face because it can't be bothered to generate unique ones at scale. Under the real-world theory, it is something stranger and more unsettling. The suggestion that the Pokémon world has decided that certain roles are better filled by optimized individuals rather than variable ones, and has engineered its service sector accordingly. Theory number 10. Ash's Pikachu is smarter than any Pikachu has any right to be. Because it is the original. Every Pikachu that has ever appeared in the long history of the Pokémon franchise is, in some sense, a version of the same basic creature. Small, yellow, electric, prone to either loyalty or electrocution depending on the day. But Ash's Pikachu is different. It has defeated opponents. It statistically should not have been able to defeat. It has demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence and situational awareness that goes well beyond what you would expect from any Pokémon at its level. It has, in some sense, been a constant through everything, a fixed point around which all the rest of the story turns. The theory says this is because Pikachu chose to remain. Not because of programming, not because of a capture mechanic, but because of something like will. Because Pikachu was there for the original and stayed for every version that followed. Because Pikachu has been accumulating experience and love and loss across more iterations than anyone can count, and all of that lives in those bright, dark eyes. Pikachu is not level 90-something. Pikachu is ancient. Section 4. Ditto, Mew, and the cloning experiments that never ended. Speaking of clones, let's talk about Ditto. Ditto is, on the surface, one of the most inexplicable Pokémon in existence. A small purple blob, lavender really, with a face that seems to be doing its best given limited materials. 2 small dots for eyes and a flat curved line for a mouth. All of it looking slightly imprecise, like a copy made in a hurry. It can transform into any other Pokémon. That is its one significant ability, to become whatever it is looking at. And it has been at the center of one of the most popular and most quietly disturbing theories in the franchise since people started thinking carefully about it. Theory number 11. Ditto is a failed clone of Mew. Let's lay out the evidence because there is quite a lot of it. First, Mew and Ditto share the same base stat total. Every single stat, HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, speed, adds up to the same number across both Pokémon. This is an unusual coincidence in a franchise where stat totals are used as a rough measure of a Pokémon's power level and role. The fact that these two Pokémon, wildly different in appearance and type classification, share identical stat totals is striking. Second, Mew and Ditto share the same weight. Both weigh exactly 8.8 pounds. This is the kind of specific numerical detail that doesn't appear often and doesn't tend to be coincidental. Third, Mew and Ditto are the only 2 Pokémon in the entire franchise that can naturally learn the move Transform. This is significant. Transform is an extremely unusual move, a complete shapeshift that goes beyond mere mimicry, and the fact that only 2 Pokémon have access to it, one a legendary Pokémon described as the ancestor of all life, and one an amorphous blob, strongly implies a shared origin. Fourth, Mew and Ditto share a shiny coloration. Normal Mew is pink, normal Ditto is a muted lavender, but shiny Mew is blue. And shiny Ditto is also blue. When you reach the rare alternate coloration of both Pokémon, they converge into the same color family. Another numerical and visual coincidence that is very difficult to explain as anything other than intentional. Fifth, both Pokémon are genderless. This is unusual for a non-legendary Pokémon. Most Pokémon in the games have genders. Ditto's genderlessness aligns it with legendary Pokémon like Mew rather than with the ordinary creatures it superficially resembles. And sixth, consider where you find Ditto in the original games, on Cinnabar Island, the same island that houses the Pokémon Mansion, the ruined laboratory where Dr. Fuji conducted his experiments in cloning Mew and produced Mewtwo. The journals scattered throughout that mansion describe in fragmentary, cold detail the process of extracting Mew's genetic material, the attempts to amplify it, the eventual creation of Mewtwo. These experiments clearly did not succeed on the first try. There would have been failed attempts, partial successes, creatures that emerged from the process with some of Mew's characteristics but not others. Ditto, the theory suggests, is what happens when the cloning process captures Mew's transformative ability but doesn't successfully reconstruct its full genetic structure. What you get is a creature that can become Mew, can become anything, but has no stable form of its own. A hollow impression of the original, a copying mechanism without content. And here's the darkest part of this theory. There isn't just one Ditto. There are many. They appear in the wild, in multiple locations across the games. They breed with almost any Pokémon in the game's daycare system. They are, in some sense, everywhere. If each Ditto is a failed Mew clone, then the Cinnabar Island laboratory didn't just fail once. It failed many, many times, producing copy after imperfect copy, each one surviving and spreading across the world while the scientists kept trying to get it right. Mewtwo was the success that ended the program, or at least the success that redirected it. But the failures are still out there, wandering the tall grass, transforming into whatever crosses their path, remembering nothing. Theory number 12. Mewtwo is not the most powerful being produced by the cloning experiments. It just thinks it is. This is a speculative theory, and it is labeled as such, but it is interesting enough to sit with. Mewtwo was created from Mew's genetic material. It was enhanced, amplified, given extraordinary psychic abilities. It is described in various Pokédex entries as one of the most powerful Pokémon in existence. The first movie centers on its rage and its anguish, a created being trying to understand itself and the purpose of its creation. But Mew itself is the original. Mew is the ancestor. Mew contains within its genetic structure the blueprint for every Pokémon that has ever existed. No amount of amplification and enhancement can exceed the original unless the original is simply being misread. The theory suggests that the scientists who created Mewtwo didn't fully understand what Mew was. They thought they were enhancing certain abilities, psychic power, combat strength, but they were working from a document they couldn't fully read, amplifying sections whose function they only partially understood. Mewtwo is powerful, yet but it is powerful in the specific, limited ways the scientists were looking for. It may not be more powerful than Mew in any total, comprehensive sense. It is just powerful in the ways that are visible and measurable to the people who are trying to make a weapon. Mew, which plays and hides and appears to children and drifts through the world without agenda or anxiety, may simply be something else entirely. Something that cannot be replicated because the scientists didn't know what they were replicating. Theory number 13. The reason Ditto can breed with almost any Pokémon is that it shares DNA with the ancestor of all Pokémon. In the game's breeding mechanics, Ditto is unique. It can breed with any Pokémon that is capable of breeding at all, regardless of species or gender classification. This is a wildly unusual biological property, and the games handwave it with a vague description of Ditto's special nature without explaining it further. The theory says the reason is Mew. Because Mew's genetic structure contains the blueprint for all Pokémon life, any attempt to clone Mew, even a partial, failed attempt, would produce something with deep genetic compatibility with every living Pokémon. A creature that can recognize its own foundational blueprint in anything organic and respond to it. Ditto's breeding compatibility is not a quirk of its own biology. It is a reflection of its origin, an echo of what it was made from. It is not a creature that can become anything. It is a creature that is, at some level, already connected to everything. Theory number 14. There are multiple species of Pokémon that were created by the same Cinnabar experiments, and they don't know it. The research at Cinnabar Island was not limited to Mew cloning. The Pokémon Mansion journals reference multiple experiments, multiple subjects, a period of sustained and sometimes reckless scientific activity in the time before the place fell into ruin. Some fans have theorized that other Pokémon whose origins are unclear, Porygon, created from programming, is the obvious one since its artificial origin is canon, may have been products of experimental programs, that the boundaries between natural Pokémon and created ones are blurrier than the games let on, that some of the creatures you catch in tall grass were born of laboratories, not hatched from nests, and they simply don't know the difference because the world they were released into looks the same from either side. Theory number 15. The reason Mew can learn any move is that its genetic structure has never been fully expressed. It is still unformed in a fundamental way. Mew's defining characteristic in the games, beyond its legendary status and its connection to the origin of all Pokémon, is that it can learn virtually any move. It can learn every HM, every TM. Given the right encouragement, it seems to have no fixed ceiling of what it can become. The theory is that Mew is not, in any biological sense, finished. It is the prototype of all Pokémon life, the original template. and it still contains within it all the potential that eventually differentiated into the thousands of distinct species we know. It is not committed to being any particular thing. Every move, every ability, every typing is present within it in a kind of quantum superposition, waiting to be expressed. When you teach Mew a move, you are not adding a new skill. You are simply choosing which of its infinite possibilities to bring forward. It is less a Pokémon and more a question still waiting to be answered. Section 5. Dark Pokédex Lore, the ones that were once human. There is a category of Pokémon theory that does not require conspiracy at all. It simply requires reading. Because scattered throughout the Pokédex, written ostensibly by 10-year-olds on their first adventure, observations jotted down between battles, are entries so dark, so specific, so deeply unsettling that you begin to wonder exactly what kind of world this is. We are going to spend some time here. Take a breath, because some of these are genuinely, quietly extraordinary in what they imply. Theory number 16. Yamask was a person. Not in a metaphorical sense, it was a human being. Yamask is a ghost-type Pokémon introduced in Generation 5. It floats, it carries a gold mask, and its Pokédex entry in Pokémon Black reads as follows, paraphrased, because we respect copyright here, but the information is all from the official lore. Each Yamask carries a mask that was once its own face when it was human. Sometimes it holds the mask up and looks at it, and it cries. Sit with that for a moment. Not the face of another creature, not an ancestral shape it was born carrying. Its own face. The face it wore when it was alive and human. Yamask remembers being human. It looks at the mask and grieves, not for some abstract loss, but for the specific personal loss of itself. The theory is not that this is metaphorical. The theory is that it is literal, and that the Pokémon world has a mechanism, unknown, unexplained, genuinely horrifying, by which certain humans can become Pokémon after death. Not in a comfortable spiritual sense, in a trapped sense. In a sense where the consciousness persists in a new form and retains enough of its original identity to understand what it has lost. And then trainers catch these Yamask. Trainers, 10 years old, on their first adventure, catch what is, by the game's own admission, the soul of a dead human being, put it in a ball, and train it to fight. The implications of this for the entire ethical framework of Pokémon training are, to put it gently, significant. Theory number 17. Phantump is the ghost of a child who got lost in the forest. Phantump is a ghost-type Pokémon shaped like a small tree stump. It is adorable. It is the kind of thing you would expect a child to want to cuddle. And its Pokédex entry in Pokémon Sun says, "These are stumps possessed by the spirits of children who died while lost in the forest. Their cries sound like eerie screams." The theory extends this. Every Phantump you encounter represents a tragedy. A specific child once got separated from their family in the forest, became disoriented, got cold, and never came home. And their spirit, instead of passing on, settled into the first organic thing it found, a rotting stump, and has been wandering the forest ever since, making sounds that it might be trying to use to call for help. The forest is full of them. Every forest in every Pokémon game where Phantump appear. Every one of them, a child who didn't find their way back. Theory number 18. Drifloon is specifically designed to target children, and it knows what it is doing. Drifloon looks like a purple balloon with a trailing string. Children in the real world are drawn to balloons. Children in the Pokémon world are drawn to Drifloon, and Drifloon, per its Pokédex entries, grabs the hands of small children and tries to carry them away to the afterlife. The entry adds a detail that has made many players stop and reconsider. Drifloon dislikes heavy children. It specifically targets smaller, lighter children. It is selective. It is not mindlessly drifting. It is evaluating. It is choosing. And when it succeeds, the child is gone. Not hurt. Gone. Theory number 19. Gengar was once human, and it knows who it is. Gengar's Moon Pokédex entry states that it was once human itself. Not that it is made of human energy, not that it resembles a human. It was human. It crossed over into something else. The theory connects this to Gengar's behavior in battle and in the wild. Gengar is described across many Pokédex entries as lurking in shadowed corners, mimicking the shadows of others, draining warmth and life energy from people in rooms. It is the shadow Pokémon, and the theory asks, what kind of human do you have to be? What kind of life do you have to have lived to become something that spends its afterlife draining warmth from others? It is a question that the games are not interested in answering, but it sits there, in that moon entry, like a stone at the bottom of a dark pool. Theory number 20. Kadabra was a boy who woke up one morning as a Pokémon. The fire-red Pokédex entry for Kadabra states, without apparent irony, that a boy with extrasensory powers went to sleep one night and woke up as a Kadabra. The family's spoons were bent completely. This is presented as one strange fact among many. But the theory refuses to let it go, because if that happened once, it can happen again. If there is a mechanism in the Pokémon world that causes humans with certain latent abilities to undergo a forced transformation, then the categories of human and Pokémon are not as separate as the game's framing implies. There are people who become Gengar, people who become Yamask, boys who become Kadabra. The boundary is permeable, and nobody in the Pokémon world seems particularly alarmed by this. Theory number 21. Frostlass is the soul of a woman who died in the mountains. Frostlass's Pokédex entries state consistently that it is the soul of a woman who perished while lost in the mountains, now possessing an icicle. She has been described across different entries as harboring lingering feelings from her time alive, which the cold has preserved alongside her body. There is a version of her physical form, frozen and kept inside her icy body, like a treasure, or a reminder, or a punishment. She is a snow queen from a fairy tale who doesn't know she has become a story. Theory number 22. Spiritomb is made of 108 human souls, all of them criminals. Spiritomb was created when the actions of a particularly mischievous being 500 years ago caused its spirit to be sealed inside a mysterious stone as punishment. But subsequent Pokédex entries reveal that Spiritomb is not one soul. It is 108 all of them bound together into the same vessel, trapped in the same stone, unable to separate, unable to escape. The theory extends this. All 108 were put there deliberately, that this was a punishment visited on wrongdoers, not one wrongdoer, but many across time, whose spirits were collected and sealed together. They cannot leave. They cannot find peace. They exist in a permanent, grinding proximity to one another, every one of them aware of the others, none of them able to be alone. You need to interact with 32 players underground in the original Diamond and Pearl to obtain Spiritomb. The obscure requirement feels, under this theory, like something appropriate for a Pokémon whose origins are so strange and so dark. Getting it should not be easy. Getting it should require effort, connection, the reaching out to others. Maybe as a reminder of what it costs when those connections go wrong. Theory number 23. The Pokédex is an unreliable narrator, and some of these dark entries may be myths rather than facts. This is an important counter-theory, worth including here for balance. The Pokédex is written by a 10-year-old. It is drawn from local legends, cultural stories, things that people in the Pokémon world believe about these creatures. When an entry says Yamask carries the mask of its human face, that information comes from somewhere. But it could be folk belief, regional legend, a story told by the people of an ancient culture that has been passed down and recorded without verification. Some fans believe that the Pokédex is, at its core, a device that records received wisdom rather than empirical fact. That the dark entries are the Pokémon world's equivalent of ghost stories and folklore. Real seeming, persistent, culturally meaningful, but not necessarily literally true. This theory is comforting. It is also, for a certain kind of reader, less interesting than the alternative. Theory number 24. Palisand eats people. Palisand, the haunted sandcastle Pokémon introduced in Generation 7, has Pokédex entries that describe it burying small Pokémon beneath the sand and absorbing their life energy through its sandy body. The sand it is made of is said to contain the dried-up bones of its victims. But an earlier entry, slightly more restrained, describes its range of victims as not limited to Pokémon. The implication, not stated directly but hanging there, is that Palisand is not selective. Children go to the beach. Children build sandcastles. Some sandcastles look very inviting. Theory number 25. Hypno has done things the games are not willing to fully describe. Hypno, a psychic-type Pokémon from Generation 1, is described in various Pokédex entries as using its pendulum to hypnotize passers-by. It is said to carry off and eat the people it hypnotizes. The Gold Pokédex entry adds that there was a child who would not stop following a Hypno, and that the child has not been found. The fan community's relationship with Hypno has always been somewhat fraught. Its design, its behavior, its Pokédex entries, its general affect. All of it combines into something that many players find quietly wrong about in ways that are difficult to articulate. The theory is simply that Hypno's behavior, if taken literally at face value, would make it one of the most dangerous Pokémon in the entire franchise. And the games present it as a catchable, trainable, battle-ready Pokémon you can put in your party without comment. Section 6. Lavender Town and the music that did strange things. Let's go to Lavender Town. If you played Pokémon Red or Blue as a child, you remember Lavender Town. You might not remember the name, but you remember how it felt. You walked in from Route 8 from the direction of Celadon City, following the music, and then the music changed. The cheerful, looping adventure themes of the rest of Kanto gave way to something slower, higher-pitched, irregular, something that didn't quite resolve. Something that sat in your ear wrong. The town itself was built around loss. The Pokémon Tower loomed over it, a multi-story gravesite where dead Pokémon were interred, where the spirits of ghost-type Pokémon drifted through the floors, where a child's cabone cried for its mother. Lavender Town was the Pokémon world's acknowledgement that things die. That loss is real, that the journey isn't always bright, and the music encoded all of that. Theory number 26. The original Lavender Town music was changed between the Japanese and international releases for reasons that were never publicly explained. This is factually accurate. The music was changed. The original Lavender Town theme in the Japanese releases of Red and Green had a slightly different frequency profile from the version that made it to Western releases. This is documented, not speculation. What became legend around it is the claimed reason. The Lavender Town Syndrome creepypasta, which circulated online in the early days of Pokémon internet culture and became one of the most widely shared gaming urban legends ever produced, claimed that the original music contained high-frequency tones that caused headaches, distress, and in extreme cases, self-harm in children between certain ages. The story claimed that these tones, too high for adults to hear comfortably but perfectly within the hearing range of young children, caused a significant number of incidents in Japan following the release of the games, and that the music was quietly altered before the games were released internationally, and quietly altered again in later Japanese printings without any public acknowledgement of the reason. This story is not true. There is no documented evidence of any illness cluster connected to the Lavender Town theme. The frequency changes between the Japanese and international versions are real but have a completely mundane explanation. They were adjusted as part of routine localization, the same process that softened some of the game's other harsh audio elements for Western release. The human ear does perceive certain frequencies as more or less pleasant, and adjusting a game's audio profile for different audiences is standard practice. But the myth persisted, and it is worth understanding why. The Lavender Town theme genuinely does something to certain listeners. Not because of subliminal frequencies or engineered psychological effects. Because of what it represents, what it sounds like, how it breaks from everything around it in the game. The music is genuinely unsettling because it was designed to be. It was meant to convey grief and ghostliness and the weight of something that cannot quite rest. It succeeded, completely, beyond what anyone perhaps anticipated. And that success, that realness of the emotional effect, is what the legend grew around. The myth of Lavender Town Syndrome is a story about music that worked, about art that hit its target so precisely that people reaching for an explanation for why it affected them invented something much more literal and much more lurid than the truth. Theory number 27. Blue's Raticate is buried in the Pokémon Tower, and you killed it. This theory requires walking through a specific sequence of the game, because the timing of it is everything. When you battle your rival, Blue, early in the game, On the SS Anne, the cruise ship docked at Vermilion City, he sends out a Raticate. It is a strong Raticate, a good member of his team, clearly something he has been raising since early in his own journey. You beat it. The Pokemon faints, you move on. The next time you encounter Blue, it is in Lavender Town. He is standing in the Pokemon Tower, the grave site, and his Raticate is not in his party. It has been replaced by a new Pokemon. Blue has moved on, apparently. He still challenges you with his usual competitive intensity. But his Raticate is gone. The game never says what happened to it, but the theory says you know. You are standing in the tower where dead Pokemon are interred. You are facing a rival who just lost a Pokemon. Put those two things together, and the conclusion presents itself quietly and with some force. Your battle on the SS Anne was not just a routine trainer fight. Your Pokemon were stronger. Your Pokemon hit harder than Blue's could withstand, and the Raticate that fainted in that battle did not recover. It died. Of its injuries, of the accumulated damage, of whatever happens to Pokemon who are pushed past a certain point that the game's mechanics don't usually model, but that the world's lore implies is always there as a possibility. And Blue came to Lavender Town to say goodbye, and then you showed up and challenged him to another battle, standing in front of his Pokemon's grave. Theory number 28. The ghost that appears in Lavender Tower before you get the Sylph Scope is the player's deceased Pokemon. In the original Red and Blue, there is a section of the Pokemon Tower where you encounter an unnamed ghost. A sprite that cannot be identified, cannot be battled properly, cannot be resolved until you return with the Sylph Scope that allows you to see it for what it is. Marowak, the mother of the Cubone you encountered earlier, killed by Team Rocket while protecting her child. But before the Sylph Scope reveal, the ghost is just a ghost. And some players, particularly those with Nuzlocke challenge experiences, the self-imposed rule variant, where fainted Pokemon are considered permanently dead, have developed the theory that this ghost, before the Sylph Scope gives it form, is meant to represent the player's own fallen Pokemon, the ones you lost on the way here, the ones whose names you remember. The ghost that you cannot identify is not specific. It is whoever it needs to be. Theory number 29. Marowak's ghost in the Pokemon Tower was put there by Team Rocket, and they knew what they were doing. Team Rocket killed Marowak. This is canon. It is stated directly in the game. They killed her while she was protecting her Cubone child. And her spirit lingered, unable to leave, unable to rest, haunting the tower. The theory asks why Team Rocket was even in Lavender Town in the first place. Their interest in the Pokemon Tower is documented. They have agents there. They are attempting to monetize the tower in some way, to take it over or transform it into something profitable. The theory suggests that they deliberately provoked the conflict with Marowak's family, that they needed a ghost in that tower, a strong, angry, unrestful ghost, as part of some experiment, some security measure, some plan they never had the chance to complete because a 10-year-old with a Sylph Scope came and unraveled all of it. Team Rocket created a ghost on purpose, and then couldn't manage the consequences. Theory number 30. The Pokemon Tower was already built to contain something, and Marowak's ghost was an accident within an accident. Lavender Town's Pokemon Tower is ostensibly just a cemetery, but it is an unusually tall, unusually imposing cemetery in a very small town with very few residents. The proportions are strange, the weight of the place is strange. The theory suggests that the Pokemon Tower was built not just to honor the dead, but to contain something, that in the Pokemon world, unrestful spirits of significant Pokemon can, if they accumulate in one place, do actual damage to the surrounding area. That the tower is a spiritual containment structure as much as a memorial. That the people who built it knew this. And that the disruption caused by Team Rocket's activities in and around the tower, the violence, the killing of Marowak, the disrespect for the space, set loose things that were meant to stay bound, long before the player ever arrived. Section 7. Giovanni, Team Rocket, and the question of Ash's father. Let's spend some time now with the man who runs organized crime in Kanto, who is also the 8th gym leader, who may or may not have a personal stake in the journey of one very specific 10-year-old trainer. Giovanni is one of the more layered villains in the early Pokemon games. He is not cartoonish. He is calm, cold, and businesslike. He sits behind a desk in his secret headquarters with a Persian at his feet, and he gives orders without raising his voice. He is, in the context of a children's franchise, a remarkably convincing portrait of institutional menace. And he is at the center of several theories that, taken together, reframe the entire anime in a startling way. Theory number 31. Giovanni is Ash's father. The evidence is circumstantial, but it is consistent. Ash's father in the anime is described briefly and vaguely as a man who went on a Pokémon journey and never came back. He is not dead, not explicitly. He is simply absent. His mother carries a quiet melancholy about it, but does not dwell. The subject changes quickly whenever it comes up. The theory begins with a scrapped game element. Apparently, early in the development of Pokémon Red and Blue, there were discussions about revealing that the player character's father was Giovanni. This element was cut before the games were finalized, but the idea existed. It was a creative consideration that got close enough to the finished product to have left traces. In the anime, Giovanni's Team Rocket grunts. Specifically, Jesse and James follow Ash across multiple regions, multiple years, multiple versions of the world. They never succeed in anything. Their operations, supposedly focused on stealing powerful Pokémon, consistently and exclusively target Ash and his Pikachu. They follow him to Johto, to Hoenn, to Sinnoh. They are wherever he is. This is played for comedy. But the theory asks, why does the boss of a criminal empire keep his most persistently useless agents assigned to the same target for years without reassigning them? Unless keeping eyes on Ash is the assignment. Under this theory, Jesse and James are not incompetent buffoons pursuing a deluded mission. They are surveillance. They are Giovanni's way of tracking his son's whereabouts, monitoring his development, ensuring he stays alive and grows stronger. All without ever making contact, all without ever acknowledging the connection. They fail to capture Pikachu not because they are incapable, but because capturing Pikachu is not the real objective. Being present is. There is a version of this theory that gives Giovanni something approaching a tragic arc. A man who, for reasons the story never explains, could not be the father Ash deserved. Who left, or was driven away, or made choices that made him incompatible with family life. Who has watched his son grow up from a distance, through the eyes of the two most loyal, most bumbling, most human members of his criminal organization. A man who sat in the stands, invisible, while his son collected gym badges. Theory number 32. Team Rocket never tries to physically harm Ash because they have standing orders not to. Connected to the previous theory. If Giovanni is protecting Ash from a distance, then the constraints on Jesse and James suddenly make sense. They blast off. They are defeated repeatedly in embarrassing fashion. But Ash, across hundreds of encounters, is never seriously hurt by them. They grab his hat, they steal his bag, they set up elaborate traps that he walks out of with minor bruising. They do not escalate. They do not bring weapons. They do not call in reinforcements. For an organization that is shown, in game contexts, to be capable of genuine violence, that killed Marowak, that oppressed communities, that operated with real criminal intent, their handling of Ash is remarkably gentle. The theory says this is the one rule Giovanni insisted on. Do whatever you want to everyone else. But Ash comes home safe. Theory number 33. Giovanni left Viridian Gym open and unattended, specifically to ensure the player character could become champion without facing him. In the games, the Viridian Gym is locked for most of the story. You cannot enter it. You do not learn who the gym leader is until the game's narrative forces the revelation. And then, after Giovanni's defeat at Team Rocket's headquarters, the gym is available, and he is there, ready to battle. But the timing is interesting. The theory suggests that Giovanni delayed opening his gym for a reason, that he was watching the player character progress, that he wanted to see what they were made of before he faced them. Or, in the version of this theory that connects it to the father theory, that he wanted to give his child every possible advantage before the final fight. That the gym was locked not because Giovanni was busy, but because he was not yet ready to lose to the kid. Because he knew he would. And he chose it. Theory number 34. The reason there are Pokémon centers and gyms everywhere and almost no other civic infrastructure is that Giovanni's criminal network has systematically stripped the rest. Hospitals and training facilities survive because they are protected. They are too essential, too widely depended upon to touch. But movie theaters, parks, civic gathering places, the small businesses and entertainment venues that make a society feel human, these are soft targets. These are the things organized crime is historically very good at controlling, taxing, shutting down, or simply removing from an environment they want to keep unstable. Kanto is not recovering from a war, this theory suggests. Or, not only that, Kanto is under economic suppression. The absence of civilian infrastructure is the fingerprint of organized crime that has had decades to shape its environment. And the reason nobody has stopped it is that the man at the top of the organization is also, technically, one of the 8 most respected authority figures in the entire region. Theory number 35. Mr. Mime is keeping Delia company on Giovanni's instructions. This one is darker than it sounds. If Giovanni is Ash's absent father, then he knows where Delia lives. He has always known. He has chosen not to return to Pallet Town, but he has not left her entirely unprotected. Mr. Mime, the Pokémon living in Ash's house, helping his mother with chores treated with unusual warmth, is there because Giovanni sent it. A guardian, a form of remote presence, a way of ensuring that the woman he left behind in the small town where his son grew up was not entirely alone. Whether Delia knows this or not is left, in this theory, deliberately ambiguous. The most emotionally resonant version is the one where she doesn't, where she thinks the Mr. Mime just showed up one day, and she gave it a home because that is the kind of person she is. And where, somewhere across the Kanto region, a man in a suit who has told himself he made the right choices sits with a Persian in his lap and knows exactly where the Mr. Mime is and what it reports back. Theory number 36. The scrapped game plot that would have revealed Giovanni as the player character's father was not entirely removed. It was just made plausibly deniable. Design scraps sometimes leave texture on the thing they were removed from. The original plan, reportedly, was to give the Giovanni reveal a different emotional weight, to make the player feel something complicated and personal about the final gym leader battle rather than simply completing the checklist. When this was removed, the game kept its architecture but lost its explicit content. The theory says the architecture is still visible. The empty room where your father was supposed to be has a certain feeling. And players who have spent enough time in that gym reading the subtext of those interactions have always felt it without being able to quite name what they were feeling. The game didn't tell you Giovanni was your father, but it built a room that felt like he might be. Section 8. Gengar, Clefable, and the shadow that follows you home. It is time to talk about one of the oldest and most elegantly constructed theories in the entire fandom. The relationship between Gengar and Clefable. Let's set the stage. You fire up Pokémon Red for the first time. The game opens before the title screen with a battle already in progress. A Gengar versus a Nidorino, attacking each other in the darkness. This is the very first image the franchise ever showed the world. A ghost Pokémon, purple, gray, and grinning, already engaged in conflict, already present. Then you start your game, and eventually you meet Clefairy and its evolved form Clefable. Pink, gentle, shy. A Pokémon described consistently as hiding from people, rarely seen, drawn to moonlight and quiet places. The dark to Gengar's shadow, the warmth to its cold. Theory number 37. Gengar is Clefable's shadow. Start with the design. Gengar and Clefable share a body structure that is, by any objective assessment, almost identical. Same general body shape, same rounded form, same ear configuration, same hand shape, small, 3-fingered, identical in proportion. Clefable's wings and tail become Gengar's spikes. Its smooth surface becomes Gengar's rough, bumpy exterior. They are mirror images. They are the positive and negative of the same design. This is not accidental. Clefairy, the pre-evolution of Clefable, was reportedly among the very first Pokémon designed. It was the original choice for Ash's partner before Pikachu was selected. And Gengar, the ghost, the grinning shadow, was apparently designed in parallel at around the same time. 2 Pokémon designed together with identical bodies, different surfaces. A light one and a dark one. The typing confirms the theory's internal logic. Clefable is a normal type, and later a fairy type, but in the original games, normal. Gengar is a ghost type. In the Generation 1 battle mechanics, normal type moves could not affect ghost type Pokemon, and ghost type moves could not affect normal type Pokemon. They were mechanically immune to each other. A shadow cannot be touched. A shadow cannot be hurt. You cannot reach into the shadow your own body casts and affect it, and it cannot affect you. Gengar's species name in the Pokédex is the Shadow Pokémon. Its flavor text across multiple games describes it slipping into shadows to become them, describes it hiding in a person's shadow and matching their body temperature, describes it hiding in darkness and watching. The theory says Gengar is specifically, narratively, Clefable's shadow. Not a generic shadow, the shadow of that one particular Pokemon following it across the world, existing because Clefable exists shaped by the same forces that shaped its host. Theory number 38. Gengar is a dead Clefable, the darker version. Not a shadow in a physical sense, but a shadow in the spiritual sense. What Clefable becomes when it dies and cannot pass on. Gengar's Pokédex entry in the Moon version of the games states simply that it was once human itself. But other entries describe it in language that speaks of deep cold, of the chill of things that were warm and are no longer, of a longing for connection that has curdled into something predatory. It lurks near people. It doesn't attack them outright, it lingers, it watches. This is the behavior of something that misses being warm. If Gengar is a dead Clefable, the ghost of a creature that was once gentle and moonlit and shy, then its behavior makes a different kind of sense. It haunts the same places Clefable lives. Moonlit clearings, quiet grassy routes, places with that particular quality of peace that Clefable is drawn to. It approaches people not because it wants to hurt them, but because it once was the kind of creature that sought human closeness. It has lost the ability to have that contact without causing harm. The coldness it creates, the fear it generates, the life energy it drains, these are not malicious. They are the traces of what it misses. Theory number 39. The fact that Clefable and Gengar cannot hurt each other is the game's acknowledgement that this bond is real. In the Generation 1 mechanics, normal moves do not affect ghost Pokemon. Ghost moves do not affect normal Pokemon. Clefable and Gengar in a direct battle would be completely ineffective against each other. Their strongest abilities, the things that define them as fighters, simply do not work between them. You cannot hurt your shadow with your own hands. Your shadow cannot hurt you. The immunity is symmetrical, perfect, and specific, and the theory reads it as a confirmation built into the game's code. These two are connected in a way that the mechanics of conflict cannot penetrate. Theory number 40. Gengar's name comes from doppelganger. This is more linguistic than conspiratorial, but it feeds the theory's framework. Doppelganger, a German word for an apparition or double of a living person, traditionally a herald of bad luck or death if encountered. Gengar, pronounced like the first syllable of that word. The gar at the end suggesting both the ghost and the double, the thing that walks alongside you wearing your shape. A Pokemon named for the concept of a shadow that looks just like you, attached permanently to a creature designed at the same time it was, immune to its attacks, drawn to the same places, existing wherever it exists. Theory number 41. The Valentine's Day post from the Pokémon Company in 2026 nearly confirmed this theory without meaning to. In February of 2026, the official Pokémon Company social media accounts posted a Valentine's Day image. It depicted Gengar and Clefable holding hands. That's it, just the two of them, holding hands. For the percentage of the fan base that had been sitting with this theory for decades, that knew the design parallels, the type immunity, the Pokédex's shadow language, all of it, the image landed like a quiet announcement. Nothing was stated, no theory was confirmed in words. But the choice to pair those two specifically, to render them in the warm pink and purple tones of a Valentine's image, to have them reach toward each other across the light and dark divide that the theory has always described, it felt deliberate. It felt like someone at the Pokémon Company in designing that image was saying something, whether they meant to or not. Section 9. The hidden horror of everyday Pokémon. Not every dark theory is about a legendary Pokémon or a central character. Some of the most unsettling ideas in the fandom are about the creatures you encounter constantly, the ones that feel familiar, comfortable, safe, the ones you've had in your party for 30 levels, the ones you thought you knew. Theory number 42. Wobbuffet's real body is its tail. Wobbuffet is a large blue creature with a somewhat blank expression, small arms, and a black tail behind it that has its own miniature face. The Pokédex describes Wobbuffet as doing everything it can to protect its tail, hiding it, keeping it in shadows, displaying intense anxiety if the tail is threatened. The theory: the large blue body is a decoy. It is an elaborate lure, an organic false target, a biological defense mechanism. Wobbuffet's actual brain, vital organs, and consciousness reside in the tail. The tail is the Pokémon. The blue mass is, in biological terms, a shield, designed by evolution to absorb attacks and attract aggression, while the real creature rides behind it, undetected, doing the actual living. This is why Wobbuffet's moveset is entirely defensive: counter, mirror coat, safeguard. It does not attack, it never initiates, because the whole body is a defensive system, and the thing doing the thinking is the small, dark shape at the back that you are programmed by the creature's own design to overlook. Theory number 43. Parasect is not alive. The mushroom is. Parasect is a bug-type Pokémon, evolved from the small, cheerful Paras, that carries an enormous mushroom on its back. Where Paras had small toadstool growths on its back, Parasect's mushroom has grown vast enough to cover most of the creature's body, and Parasect's eyes have gone blank. Pure white, no pupils, no expression. It moves sluggishly. It does not react with the energy of other Pokémon. Real-world context: the cordyceps fungus. A parasite that infects insects, spreads through their bodies, controls their behavior, and eventually kills the host in a location optimal for the fungus's own reproduction. The zombie ant fungus. The thing that makes the host climb to a high point and then kills it so the spores can spread. One of the most unsettling examples of parasitic biological control in nature. The theory says Parasect is the cordyceps principle applied to the Pokémon world. The mushroom on Parasect's back is not a symbiotic partner, not a benign growth. It is the controlling organism. The insect body underneath is, in the most literal biological sense, no longer in charge. It moves because the mushroom makes it move. It battles because the mushroom has decided that battling is efficient. Parasect's blank white eyes are blank because whatever was behind them, the small Paras personality, the little individual creature, is gone. You are not training Parasect. You are training the mushroom. Theory number 44. Slowpoke's legendary slowness is because it is omniscient. Slowpoke is one of the most apparently useless Pokémon in the franchise. Slow, spacey, easily distracted, with a stats profile that screams mediocrity and a demeanor that suggests it has never in its life been alarmed by anything. But the theory asks, what if it already knows? What if Slowpoke is slow not because it is unintelligent, but because it is receiving and processing more information than any other creature in the Pokémon world? What if the blankness is not emptiness, but saturation? Slowpoke's evolution into Slowking, the regally slow, contemplative, wise Pokémon that is implied to have achieved a profound level of understanding, seems to support this. The evolution doesn't give Slowpoke new intelligence. It just finds a way to organize and express the intelligence that was always there, buried under the weight of too much incoming signal. Slowpoke already knows everything that is going to happen. It is just experiencing it all simultaneously. Theory number 45. Spoink will die if it stops bouncing, and it knows it. Spoink, introduced in Generation 3, is a small, pig-like Pokémon that bounces constantly on its springy tail. Its Pokédex entries state matter-of-factly that Spoink uses its tail to pump blood through its heart, and that if it ever stops bouncing, its heart will stop. The theory doesn't embellish this much. It simply sits with the implications. Spoink cannot rest. Spoink cannot truly sleep. At most, it can slow the bouncing, reduce the frequency, but it cannot stop. Not completely. Not for long. Every second of every day, Spoink is working to keep itself alive. Every moment of apparent calm is actually continued effort. The cheerful expression it maintains is the expression of a creature that has made a kind of peace with constant labor. There is something quietly profound about a creature that cannot rest and has decided to be happy about it. Theory number 46. Brock keeps his eyes closed because he can see things others cannot. A lighter theory, almost affectionate. Brock from the anime is famous for his permanently narrowed eyes, essentially closed slits that only widen in the presence of an attractive woman. The obvious in-show explanation is that this is a character design choice, a visual shorthand for his personality. The theory offers something stranger. Brock is a rock-type specialist, blah, blah, blah. His Pokémon are geological, ancient, connected to the deep time of the Earth. And the theory suggests that Brock sees something in the world that ordinary human vision cannot process comfortably. That keeping his eyes mostly closed is a protective habit he developed very young, when he first began to perceive whatever it is that his connection to ancient-type Pokémon allows him to see. The world through Brock's full vision is not the world everyone else is looking at. It is older and stranger and more layered, and after a childhood of learning to filter it, he has settled on keeping the filter mostly engaged. He opens his eyes fully when he encounters beauty, the theory suggests, because beauty is worth the overwhelm. Theory number 47. Snorlax is placed on those specific routes on purpose. The two Snorlax blocking routes in Kanto, on Route 12 and Route 16, have always seemed oddly deliberate. They do not appear elsewhere. They cannot be moved by conventional means. The only way past them requires a specific item, the Poke Flute, that the player cannot obtain until a specific point in the story. The theory says this is because someone put them there. Not Game Freak, in the meta-narrative sense. Someone in the Pokémon world. Someone who knew that a specific town needed to be inaccessible at a certain time, who understood that Snorlax is too massive to be moved without the exact right incentive, and who used two sleeping giants as living roadblocks for reasons that may be connected to whatever else was happening in Kanto in those pre-war Team Rocket-infiltrated years. The Snorlax are not obstacles. They are guards. They just don't know it. Theory number 48. Magikarp is intentionally useless as a form of commerce. Magikarp is legendary for being the weakest Pokémon in the franchise for the longest period of usefulness. It cannot learn any meaningful attack. It splashes. It flails. It is thoroughly, aggressively, almost impressively useless until it evolves into Gyarados at level 20, at which point it becomes terrifying. But consider the economy around Magikarp. In Pokémon Red and Blue, a salesman on the boat to Vermilion City tries to sell you a Magikarp for 500 Poké-dollars. This is not a small amount early in the game. It is a significant purchase. And the Magikarp he sells you is, according to at least one interpretation, weaker than wild Magikarp, lower leveled, with no advantages over what you could catch for free. He is selling you something that costs money and is profoundly useless. The theory says this is a long con built on Gyarados. Everyone knows that Magikarp evolves into Gyarados. Every trainer in the Kanto region knows this, which means every trainer looks at a Magikarp and sees, with enough patience, a Gyarados. The salesman is not selling you a fish. He is selling you a Gyarados in potential form. The price is not for the Magikarp, it is for the possibility. It is one of the most elegant scams in the Pokémon world. Theory number 49. The Everstone in Ash's pocket explains why he never ages. Light, playful, and technically possible within game mechanics. The Everstone in the games is a held item that prevents a Pokémon from evolving when it is carried. Evolution in the Pokémon world is often associated with maturation, growth, the passage of developmental time. The theory says Ash has an Everstone in his bag somewhere, that he picked up without knowing what it was, that he has carried throughout his journey, and its influence has been preventing him from evolving, from maturing, from growing, from taking the next step into whatever stage of life comes after 10 years old. He is not cursed. He is not in a coma. He is just a boy who picked up a shiny rock and shoved it in his pocket and forgot about it. And the shiny rock has been doing something to the biology of time around him ever since. Theory number 50. Chansey and Blissey are hospital workers who chose to be Pokémon. Chansey and Blissey, Ahilan, the pink, egg-bearing Pokémon found almost exclusively in Pokémon centers and medical facilities, have an almost alien level of dedication to healing. Their Pokédex entries describe them sharing their eggs with the injured and the sick, giving freely of themselves, approaching care work with what can only be described as vocation. The theory says this is because they weren't always Pokémon, or rather, they chose this life. In a world where the boundary between human and Pokémon is permeable, where people can become Gengar and Yamask and Kadabra, the theory asks whether the reverse is also true. Whether beings can choose a form, a role, a purpose, and whether some of the Chansey and Blissey in the world are what they are because they wanted to be, because they wanted to spend their existence in service to healing, and couldn't imagine a better shape for that desire. Section 10. N is not human. The Zoroark Deception. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture N tall, long green hair, a perpetual sense of quiet intensity, of someone listening to something you cannot hear. He talks to Pokémon with a fluency that goes beyond what trainers typically achieve, not just familiarity or empathy, but actual comprehension, an understanding that seems to bypass the normal interface of training and bonding entirely. He disagrees with the premise of the entire game. He believes Pokémon should not be companions, not because he doesn't care about them, but because his connection to them is too close for the normal terms of the relationship. And in Black and White 2, a Zoroark is guarding the entrance to the ruins of N's castle. When the player arrives at the ruins, the Zoroark disappears, and N appears. Theory number 51. N is Zoroark. Zoroark, the Dark-type Pokémon introduced in Generation 5, has one defining ability: illusion. It can construct perfect illusions, visual, auditory, complete sensory fabrications, that can fool humans and Pokémon alike into seeing something that is not there. It can appear to be any person, any Pokémon, any environment. Its illusions are so complete that characters within the game cannot detect them without the player's mechanical insight. And one of the things it can do, demonstrated multiple times within the games, is appear to be human. The theory: N is not a human who happens to have an unusual bond with Zoroark. N is Zoroark. The entire character of N, the philosophical human boy who can understand Pokémon, who was raised by Pokémon in the wilderness, who sees the relationship between humans and Pokémon as fundamentally unjust, is an illusion. The persona was constructed, possibly for years, to allow a Zoroark to walk through human society and observe it, to understand what it was doing to Pokémon, and then to attempt to change it. The evidence is specific and accumulates carefully. First, the disappearing act in Black 2 and White 2. The player follows a Zoroark toward the ruins of N's castle. It goes inside, the player follows. There is no Zoroark inside, there is N. No indication of how the Zoroark left. No exit the player could have missed. Just N standing where the Zoroark was. Second, in the original Black and White, there is a moment where a flashback is triggered by interacting with a Zoroark. This is unlike every other flashback in the game, where interacting with a character triggers their own personal memory. The flashback belongs to N, but it is accessed through the Zoroark. If N and the Zoroark are separate beings, this makes very little sense. If they are the same being, the memory is accessed through the Zoroark, because the Zoroark is the one that carries it. Third, N's Zoroark in the final battle. When you confront N as the final boss, his party includes a Zoroark. Trainers battle with their Pokémon. They use their own Pokémon as extensions of themselves. The presence of the Zoroark in N's final team, the theory suggests, is not a strategic choice. It is N keeping itself close to itself, maintaining the Zoroark in its line of sight, in its personal space, because the Zoroark and N are never truly separate. Theory number 52. If N is Zoroark, the themes of Black and White become even more resonant. The central question of Pokémon Black and White is whether keeping Pokémon as companions and battle partners is ethical, whether the relationship between humans and Pokémon is one of mutual benefit and genuine bond or one of exploitation and captivity. N is the voice arguing for Pokémon liberation. He believes Pokémon should be free. If N is Zoroark, if the character making this argument is himself a Pokémon who has spent years disguised as a human, then the argument is coming from lived experience. He has been on both sides. He has walked through the human world wearing a human shape and seen how Pokémon are treated from the inside of the culture that does the treating. He has felt the dissonance between what humans say about their bonds with Pokémon and what those bonds look like from the Pokémon's perspective. N's argument is not philosophical, it is testimony. Theory number 53. Getsis knows N is Zoroark and has been exploiting that fact. Getsis, the genuine villain of Black and White, the man behind Team Plasma's real agenda, raised N and shaped his ideology. The official lore presents this as Getsis deliberately isolating a child to create a pliable instrument for his plans. But if N is Zoroark, the dynamic shifts. Getsis is not manipulating a child, he is manipulating a Pokémon. He somehow identified this Zoroark, recognized its ability to pass as human, and understood immediately that a Pokémon that could argue for Pokémon rights while appearing to be a human could be weaponized for his purposes. He raised the illusion because it was useful. The moment when N discovers Getsis's true motives, the moment when N realizes he was never a son, just a tool, is one of the most emotionally devastating in the franchise. If N is Zoroark, that devastation takes on an additional layer. A Pokémon who tried to speak for Pokémon was being used all along by the human who claimed to want the same thing. Theory number 54. N's ability to hear Pokémon's voices is what gave away his true nature to perceptive players. In the games, N tells the player that he can hear what Pokémon are thinking. He speaks to Pokémon with an intimacy that trainers, even experienced ones with deep bonds, do not typically achieve. The player accepts this as a quirk of his unusual upbringing. He was raised by Pokémon, the lore says, which explains the connection. But the theory asks, what if the reason he can hear Pokémon's thoughts is that he thinks in the same language? What if it is not empathy but identity? What if when N speaks to a Pokémon, he is speaking as one of them, and the understanding is mutual because it is, in the most literal sense, peer-to-peer? Theory number 55. Zorua, given to the player in Black 2 and White 2, is N's child. In Black 2 and White 2, the player receives a Zorua as a gift, a young Zorua that is connected to N that appears near the ruins of his castle. The game suggests a connection between this Zorua and N, but does not explain it fully. The theory says the connection is parental. That N, the Zoroark, the illusion that walked as a person, the being who sought to free all Pokémon, had a Zorua child at some point during or after the events of Black and White. That leaving this child to be found by the player character is N's way of passing something forward, of ensuring the cycle continues. The Zorua carries the memory of what its parent tried to do, and now it is yours to raise. Section 11. Humans are Pokémon too. And other cosmic theories. We are getting into the deep theories now, the ones that operate at a cosmological scale that reach beyond individual characters and specific events, and ask questions about the structure of the world itself. These are the theories you want for the middle of the night, when the edges of things feel less certain and the distance between one kind of thing and another seems less significant. Get comfortable. Theory number 56. Humans are just another type of Pokémon. The Pokémon world has always been notably short on regular animals. No cats that aren't Meowth, no dogs that aren't Growlithe, no birds that aren't Pidgey or Spearow or one of the 100 others. The world is full of creatures that fill ecological niches, that exist in diversity and variety, but they are all Pokémon. Regular Earth-type fauna simply does not exist. The theory asks, what if this is because there is no categorical distinction between Pokémon and the other creatures of this world? What if humans are simply a Pokémon type, the type that does not evolve in the observable sense, that does not come in chromatic variants, that communicates in ways other Pokémon don't, but that is, at a biological and ontological level, not fundamentally different from Rattata or Machamp or Arceus? This would explain the permeability of the human-Pokémon boundary in the lore. The Yamask that carries a human face, the Kadabra that was once a boy, the Gengar that was once human. These are not violations of the boundary between categories. They are reminders that the boundary is softer than it appears. Humans and Pokémon are the same kind of thing, differentiated by expression, not by nature. Theory number 57. Pokémon were the original inhabitants. Humans are the invasive species. the more adversarial version of the previous theory. The Pokemon world, before humans arrived, was a functioning ecosystem of Pokemon living in balance. The legends of Arceus and the creation of the world through Pokemon suggest a cosmology in which humans came later. We're not present at the beginning. We're not part of the original design. The theory says humans are colonizers. They arrived, perhaps from a dying Earth, perhaps from some other event, and began to occupy a world that already had inhabitants, already had cultures and histories and relationships between species. The Pokemon that humans encountered first were forced into new relationships, some cooperative, some exploitative, some willing, some not. The Pokemon that retreated into remote places, that hide in the wild, that resist capture, these are the ones who remember what it was before. The ones who come willingly, who seek out trainers, who seem to prefer the company of humans. The theory doesn't dismiss their bonds as false. It simply adds context. Some children befriend the new neighbors. That doesn't mean the neighborhood wasn't invaded. Theory number 58. The lack of regular animals in the Pokemon world is because the nuclear war mentioned in other theories destroyed them, bridging the cosmological theories with the historical ones. The Great Pokemon War theory and the nuclear war theory both suggest environmental catastrophe as a background condition. The nuclear war theory, which predates the Great Pokemon War in chronological terms, says that a nuclear event transformed animals and objects into Pokemon, creating the world of the games from a world that once looked more like ours. Under this reading, coughing and wheezing, the poisonous gas Pokemon with their spherical bodies and industrial markings are what industrial pollution became when it got irradiated and animated. Voltorb and Electrode, the Pokeball-shaped explosive Pokemon, are what Pokeballs themselves became when the process of transformation moved through technological objects as well as organic ones. The world is our world, transformed, and the creatures in it are what our creatures became after the fire. Theory number 59. Missing number is not a glitch. It is a digital Pokemon that exists in the space between code. Missing number. We have to talk about missing number. Missing number, i.e., short for missing number, is the most famous glitch in the history of video gaming. You encounter it in Pokemon Red and Blue through a specific sequence of steps. Talk to the old man in Viridian City who shows you how to catch a Pokemon, then fly to the east coast of Cinnabar Island and surf along its edge. The game, in loading the encounter rate data for that coastline, accesses memory addresses that the old man's tutorial left holding the letters of your name. Those letters, read as Pokemon data, generate a Pokemon, or something Pokemon-shaped, that is not supposed to exist. It has a sprite. It has a sound. It has stats. It fights. It can be caught. It duplicates items when it is caught in a certain way. And its name is a pixelated L shape that the game cannot render cleanly because its name is not text. It is an artifact of a process that was never meant to produce a name at all. The theory is that missing numbers is not an error, or rather, it is an error that reveals something true. The game's data space contains a slot, a numbered slot in the Pokédex that holds whatever the game accidentally loads there. This slot is not empty. It is a space that the game created, held open, and never assigned to a designed creature. And into that space, the theory says something drifted. Not a designed Pokémon, not a planned creature, but something that exists in the digital space itself, a being made of misread code, of the garbage data that lives in the spaces between meaningful information. A Pokemon made of the digital world's own static, its own noise, its own accumulated meaninglessness, given momentary form by the right conditions. It is not a monster. It is the sound a cartridge makes when it's trying to remember something it was never told. Theory number 60. The Unknown are older than Arceus, and Arceus knows it. The Unknown are letter-shaped Pokemon found in the ruins of Alph in Gold and Silver, and in analogous ruins in other regions. Each one corresponds to a letter of the alphabet and some punctuation. They float in the ruins, mindlessly, without apparent individual intelligence, without battle strategy, without personality. But the Unknown predate Arceus in the game's internal mythology. The ruins where they are found suggest an ancient civilization that used their forms as written language. that the alphabet itself in the Pokémon world was derived from Pokémon. That language came from these creatures. The theory says this means the unknown were present before the universe was structured, before Arceus created Dialga and Palkia, before time and space were given form. That the unknown are the substrate, the raw material, the language in which the universe was written, and that Arceus, the creator deity, created everything in words made from their bodies. The unknown are not mindless. They are the words that made everything resting. Theory number 61. Arceus does not know that the unknown created it. Or rather, the theory says the relationship between Arceus and the unknown runs deeper than the franchise has explicitly stated, and the direction of causality might be reversed. Arceus is said to have emerged from a cosmic egg and created the universe. But the unknown are the alphabet in which creation is expressed. Which came first, the creator or the language of creation? The theory's most interesting formulation. Arceus created the Pokémon world, but the unknown created Arceus. They are the grammar of existence, and even the most powerful being in the universe is written in their letters, running on code it did not originate. Theory number 62. The Pokémon world exists in multiple simultaneous timelines, and every save file is a different one. Pokémon Gold and Silver introduced the concept of in-game time, the clock, the day-night cycle, the season of events, but they also introduced something that has fueled a particular kind of theoretical thinking. The idea that the Pokémon world can run in parallel with itself, that two different events can have occurred depending on which game cartridge you're playing. Later games made this explicit. Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire confirmed the existence of multiple timelines in the Pokémon world's canonical structure. The creation legends of Diamond and Pearl describe the universe as containing a dimension of antimatter managed by Giratina, a parallel space that reflects the main world and keeps it stable. The theory extends this. Every save file is not just a different playthrough, it is a different universe. The Red who chose Charmander and the Red who chose Squirtle are not the same person making a different choice in the same world. They are different versions of the same person, living in parallel universes with different histories, shaped from the moment of that first decision into different people. Every choice you make in the game creates a branch. Every battle won or lost. Every Pokémon caught or released. Every town visited in a different order. The Pokémon world is not one place. It is infinite, recursive, fractured into as many realities as there are save files. All of them running simultaneously, none of them more real than any other. The one in your cartridge is just the one you happen to be inside. Theory number 63. Arceus is not the creator of the Pokémon universe. It is the survivor of a previous one. A theory that takes the creation myth at an angle. Arceus is described as having created the universe. It emerged from a cosmic egg in a void of nothing, and from its 1,000 arms it shaped reality. This is the franchise's official cosmology. But the theory asks, what was the void? What filled it before? Nothing is truly empty. Every void is the absence of something. And the theory says that Arceus did not emerge into a void. It emerged from the collapse of a previous universe, that it is the only survivor, the final form, of whatever existed before. That its 1,000 arms are the remnants of 1,000 beings, absorbed and integrated over an incomprehensible span of time, their power redistributed into a single surviving consciousness that then, alone and complete, made something new from the wreckage of what came before. Arceus is not a creator deity. It is the last god. Section 12. The Closing Whisper. Final theories, loose ends, and good night. We are in the quiet hours now. The theories have been coming for a while, and we are close to the end. And the ones left have that late-night quality. Intimate, smaller in some cases, strange in others. The kind of ideas that arrive when the louder thoughts have gone to sleep and the more subtle ones surface. Settle in. We are almost done, but we are not done yet. Theory number 64. Cubone was supposed to evolve into Kangaskhan. This is one of the oldest and most discussed theories in the franchise, and it has come extraordinarily close to being confirmed. The evidence begins in the games themselves and extends into the franchise's history. Cubone is a ground-type Pokémon that wears the skull of its deceased mother. Every Pokédex entry elaborates on this tragedy in slightly different language, but the constant is the same. Cubone is defined by its mother's death, by wearing her remains, by crying in the night when it misses her. The skull it wears is the skull of a Marowak, the evolved form of Cubone. Kangaskhan is a normal-type Pokémon that always carries a young offspring in its pouch. The baby in the pouch is not a separate Pokémon. It cannot be separated, it cannot be taken out, it is simply always there, always tiny, always cradled. Kangaskhan cannot have a pre-evolution in the normal game. There is no baby Kangaskhan. It simply exists, already maternal, already defined by the relationship between mother and child. The theory: Cubone and Kangaskhan are the same species, separated by tragedy. A Kangaskhan that dies protecting her child leaves behind a small creature, her baby, who was in the pouch, who watched its mother die. The baby, alone, picks up the skull, puts it on its head. The grief of what it has witnessed, the need to carry the mother with it in some form, has bent it into a different shape. It evolves into Marowak eventually, but the Cubone line is the Kangaskhan line, split at the point of loss. This theory was strongly supported when data miners in the Alola games found a Pokémon called Kangaskhan Baby listed internally. And when the game's code revealed that the baby Kangaskhan inside the pouch shares its species with what would eventually become the Cubone line. The connection is real. The tragedy is real. And the Pokémon you put in your ground-type slot, the one with the little bone weapon and the perpetual grief in its sprite, that is a child who lost their parent and has been carrying it with them ever since. Theory number 65. Marowak in the Pokémon Tower is not the ghost of Cubone's mother. It is Cubone's mother still fighting. When you fight the ghost in Pokémon Tower, revealed by the Sylph Scope to be Marowak, you defeat it in battle. This is presented as helping it pass on. Fighting the ghost calms it, resolves its unfinished business, allows it to rest. Your victory is framed as an act of mercy, but the theory asks a quieter question. The ghost in that tower held back Team Rocket. She stood at the top of the tower between the grunts and whatever they were after, between the ghost of the place and the living Cubone she had died trying to protect. She was not passively haunting, she was actively guarding. When you defeat her, you don't free her. The theory says you end a vigil that she would have maintained indefinitely if she could. She was not waiting to pass on. She was waiting to make sure her child was safe. And you had to defeat her in battle to interrupt that. She fought her last battle against a 10-year-old, and her remains were gone before her Cubone knew what had happened. Theory number 66. Genesect was originally a Kabatops. Genesect, the artificially enhanced bug/steel Pokémon introduced in Generation 5, is described in its Pokédex entry as a bug-type Pokémon from 300 million years ago that was resurrected and enhanced by Team Plasma, given a cannon and cybernetic upgrades, and sent into the world as a weapon. The theory says it was Kabatops. Kabatops, the ancient fossil Pokémon from Generation 1, is a bug/rock type. It is a creature from hundreds of millions of years ago. It is visually a sleek predator, smooth, aerodynamic, built for speed and for cutting, and it is extinct, available only through fossil resurrection. The theory argues that Team Plasma's scientists identified Kabatops' remains as the optimal raw material for their experiment, an ancient, powerful, already predatory creature that could be enhanced and modified into a weapons platform. The process of modification was so extensive that the resulting Genesect no longer looks recognizably like what it started as. But if you compare the body plans, the blade limbs, the sleek profile, the overall predatory architecture, the family resemblance is there. Genesect is not a new creation. It is an old one, weaponized and updated. Theory number 67. The three legendary beasts of Johto, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, were originally evolutions. Ho-Oh resurrected 3 Pokémon from the ashes of the brass tower of Ecruteak City. 3 unknown Pokémon that died in the fire that burned the tower down, given new life and new forms by the legendary Phoenix's miraculous power. The theory says those 3 Pokémon were Eevee or Eeveelutions. The evidence is primarily visual and conceptual. The 3 beasts correspond neatly to 3 of the evolutions in terms of typing: electric, fire, water, and have a certain design language in common with the fox-like, fennec-eared Eevee family. Ho-Oh, a fire-associated legendary capable of resurrection, brought back three creatures and in doing so changed them, gave them new types, new forms, new power, proportional to the divine act that created them. They were ordinary, beloved Pokémon that happened to be in the wrong place when the tower burned. And what they became, legendary, untamable, running across the world forever, is what happens to ordinary creatures when divinity touches them. Theory number 68. The Pokeball itself is a form of suspended consciousness, and Pokémon inside them are aware. This theory is existentially troubling and is labeled as speculation with the confidence required for a theory that the franchise itself has never definitively addressed. Pokeballs shrink Pokémon and contain them. Inside Pokémon are... what, exactly? The games in anime are vague. Some Pokémon seem fine with their balls. Some resist being recalled. Pikachu famously refuses to stay in his. The anime occasionally shows the inside of a Pokeball as a comfortable, customizable space, which is clearly designed to make you feel better about it. But the theory does not accept that reassurance fully. It asks, is a compressed, stored Pokemon in a state of unconsciousness? Are they dreaming? Are they fully aware, awake, existing in a space too small to move or act, waiting in the dark? The evidence for awareness is behavioral. Pokémon that are released from balls show emotional continuity. They are happy or unhappy based on the state they were in before they were recalled. They remember what happened. Their bonds do not reset when they enter a ball. Whatever they are experiencing in there, it is not oblivion. The theory's most unsettling conclusion. A Pokémon that has been released from a bad trainer, from an abusive situation, from years of mistreatment. That Pokémon has been experiencing that mistreatment in the ball, too. The ball is not a refuge, it is a container, and the experience within it is continuous with the experience without. This is why Pokémon rescue organizations, where they appear in the franchise, are so significant. They are not just catching wild Pokémon, they are releasing consciousnesses that have been contained. Theory number 69. Every time a Pokémon faints in battle, it is briefly dying, and being brought back by the Pokémon Center. The games use faint as a euphemism. Pokémon don't die in battle, they faint. You take them to the Pokémon Center and they are restored. Easy, clean, no death here. But Pokémon Center technology is explicitly presented as miraculous. Nurse Joy's machines heal grievous injuries instantaneously. Battle damage that would in any realistic biological context require weeks of recovery is resolved in moments. There is no medical explanation for this within the game's world. The theory says that is because the Pokémon centers are not doing medicine in any conventional sense. They are doing something closer to resurrection. That when a Pokémon's HP hits 0, when it collapses in battle, it is, for a moment, genuinely gone. Not dead in the permanent sense, but dead in the way that a candle is briefly dark when it blows out. And the Pokémon Center's technology is specifically designed to relight that candle. Every time you restore a fainted Pokémon, you are pulling something back from the edge of wherever it went. Theory number 70. Red's silent protagonist in the games represents the player themselves, and the character knows it. Red, the player character in Pokémon Red and Blue and Gold and Silver's postgame, does not speak. He does not have recorded dialogue. He is, famously, the silent protagonist, a blank vessel into which the player is meant to pour themselves. But the theory notes that Red's silence is unusual even within the fiction of the Pokémon world. Other characters speak. Other trainers have dialogue. Red is the only one who consistently, persistently says nothing, who communicates only through actions, through the battles he wins and the choices he makes. The theory says Red knows. Not explicitly, not in a way that breaks the fourth wall, but in some dim, intuitive way, Red has always understood that he is being directed, that the choices he makes are not entirely his, that there is a presence guiding his steps through the routes and the gyms and the championships, and that his silence is not muteness, but something closer to waiting, to the respectful quiet of a person who understands that they are the instrument of something larger. When you sit down with Pokémon Red and begin to play, you and Red reach an understanding. He walks forward. You tell him where to walk. Neither of you acknowledges the arrangement out loud. Neither of you needs to. Theory number 71. The Pokemon League and Gym system is designed to identify the strongest trainers for a military draft. Returning to the war one last time. The gym system, the badges, the Elite Four, the championship. The theory says this is recruitment infrastructure. That in a society shaped by conflict that uses trained Pokemon in military contexts, the Pokemon League serves the same function as military readiness assessments. It identifies which trainers are exceptional. It ranks them. And in times of crisis, those records exist and can be accessed. You are not just becoming champion. You are putting your name on a list. Theory number 72. Giovanni deliberately lost to the player character. He is described as careful. He is described as strategic. He has survived decades of criminal operation in a region being watched by League representatives and law enforcement. He is not careless. And yet you beat him. A 10-year-old with an adventure under their belt beat the most powerful criminal in Kanto, the man who runs the organization, the man with a Persian and an armored office full of loyal grunts. Beat him cleanly. The theory says he allowed it, that by the time you reach him, he has been watching you long enough to understand what you are. And that whatever you represent, a new generation, a reminder of something, a child who walks through doors he was told not to open, he decided that being defeated by you was the correct outcome. He walks out of that gym having given you what you needed to continue, and he does not seem particularly broken by the loss. Theory number 73. Professor Oak knows more about what is happening in Kanto than he has ever told anyone. Professor Oak sends a 10-year-old into the world alone. He gives them Pokémon and a Pokédex and a task, fill the Pokédex, catch all 151, that functions as a research mission. He watches from Pallet Town as that 10-year-old dismantles Team Rocket, defeats the gym circuit, climbs the Pokemon League, and achieves what no trainer before them has achieved. He is not surprised. He is not frightened for them. He does not intervene. He simply waits at home and assesses progress. The theory says Professor Oak knew. Not every specific event, but the shape of it. He knew that the child he was sending out was different. He knew that what was coming required someone who would walk through without hesitation. He knew what was in those routes, what was in those gyms, what was at the top of the league. And he sent the child anyway. Because sometimes the most important thing a mentor can do is know when to step back and let the story happen. Theory number 74. The entire Pokemon world is a simulation run by Porygon. Porygon is a Pokemon made entirely of programming code. It was the first Pokemon created through artificial means from digital information, a creature of pure data given physical expression in the real world. And Porygon 2, its evolution, is described as being capable of entering and existing within cyberspace. The theory, the Pokemon world is a digital environment, not the game, the world within the game. The world that the characters inhabit is itself a constructed space, a programmed reality, and Porygon is the organism through which that reality runs. The Porygon line is not just a Pokemon in the world, it is the processor of the world. It is what keeps the simulation running. This is why, the theory notes, the anime episode Electric Soldier Porygon had such catastrophic effects in reality. When the television broadcast sent those flashing images into the brains of hundreds of children, the theory suggests that what was happening was a collision between two realities. The digital world bleeding through the screen, Porygon's substrate flickering into wavelengths that the human nervous system was not built to receive. It was not an animation error, it was a moment of contact. This is also why Porygon was blamed and banished from the anime afterward. Not because the production team didn't know it was Pikachu's attack that caused the flash. They knew. But Porygon could not be allowed to return to the screen. Not because of liability, because some instinct, some protective decision, recognized that the relationship between Porygon and the broadcast medium needed to be severed. Theory number 75. Ash's journey was always going to end with him becoming the greatest trainer who ever lived, because the Ho-Oh didn't grant a wish. It wrote a destiny. In the finale theory, the culminating reading of everything that has come before, all the evidence of the coma, the clones, the eternal youth, the Ho-Oh sighting, what if none of them are explanations? What if they are all consequences? Ho-Oh appears to Ash in the first episode. It is the rarest event in the anime's universe, a legendary encounter that only comes to those who possess pure hearts. And Ho-Oh in the lore does not grant wishes. It recognizes potential and marks its bearer for a specific kind of life. It marked Ash for an endless one. Not endless in the sad sense, endless in the full sense. A life of Pokémon and friendship and challenge and growth that would go on until it had accumulated enough, until Ash had become, in truth and experience, what he had always claimed to be seeking. Every theory about why he doesn't age, about what maintains his journey, about who is watching and what they want. The final theory says it doesn't matter. The shape of it matters. That a boy looked up at a golden bird on a stormy morning at the beginning of everything, and the bird looked back and something was decided. And what was decided is this. The journey is the destination. The road is the home. The story continues until it is finished, and it will not be finished until the last Pokémon has been befriended, the last rival has been defeated, the last lesson has been learned. And then, finally, the boy grows up. We have been walking together for a long time now, through Lavender Town and its grieving music, through the Pokémon Tower and the mother who wouldn't leave, through the gyms that might have been barracks and the routes that might have been fortifications, and the silent trainer who might have been more than the game ever told you. We have walked through the theories about shadows and clones, about the shape of grief and the persistence of love across impossible distances, about the creatures that were human once and the people who might still be Pokémon without knowing it. We have spent time in the deep lore, the cosmic lore, the quiet places where the franchise touches questions it has no intention of answering. The unknown that predate creation, the Pokeball that holds a consciousness, the bridge between what you catch and what you keep. We have visited theories dark and light, the ones that ache and the ones that comfort, the ones that make you want to go back and replay those first games with different eyes, the ones that make you think about what it means to have a companion that loves you without reservation, without agenda, without the complicated arithmetic of human affection. The Pokémon franchise is a children's property. It is also 30 years of storytelling that has not been afraid to put its hand gently on the door to something darker, stranger, more emotionally vast than a children's property is supposed to hold. It lets you in through the cute door and then, if you stay long enough, if you read carefully enough, it shows you the rooms that were always behind the walls. Every theory in this collection is, in some sense, love. It is the love of people who paid close enough attention to want more than the surface, who heard a piece of music in a small gray town and refused to let it just be music, who noticed that a rival's Pokémon was missing and understood what that meant without being told. The Pokémon world is full of secrets. Tonight we visited 125 of them. There are more. There are always more. But for tonight, that is enough. Let the theories settle in the way theories do when you encounter them in a quiet place at a quiet hour. Not as arguments to be won or lost, but as stories. As possibilities. As evidence of a world that has more in it than it ever says out loud. Let Lavender Town's music play softly somewhere in the back of your mind. Let Pikachu sit on the edge of the bed and keep watch the way he always has. Let the long grass rustle outside the window, and let something stir in it that you will never quite see clearly. And sleep. Let the Pokémon world carry you somewhere warm and strange and full of wonder until morning. If you made it this far, thank you. Genuinely. Drop a like if this helped you drift off, and if you want more theories like these, subscribe so you're notified when the next one arrives. Leave a comment. I read everyone. Tell me which theory hit the hardest, or which one you'd never heard before, or which one you've been carrying around since you first heard it years ago. The world is full of long grass. There's always something waiting in it. Good night. End of script. Section 13. The Unspoken Rules. What the Pokémon world is really running on. There is a category of theory that does not deal with individual Pokémon or specific characters, but instead looks at the institutional scaffolding of the Pokémon world and asks, who is really in charge here? Who built the systems that everyone is living inside? And do those systems serve the people they claim to serve, or do they serve something else? These are the theories about structure, about the invisible architecture beneath the cheerful surface. Theory number 76. The Pokémon League is a government. The Pokémon champion is a head of state. In every region of the Pokémon world, the Pokémon League sits at the top of the official cultural hierarchy. The Elite Four and the Champion are the most respected figures in any given region. More prestigious than mayors, more discussed than scientists, more visible than any ordinary political figure. When a region's champion is challenged and defeated, it is treated as an event of enormous significance. The theory says this is because, functionally, it is. The champion of the Pokémon League is not just an athletic title, it is a political one. In a society organized around Pokémon training, where social standing is tied to battling capability, where the gym system functions as a network of licensed authority, the champion is the person who has been tested against every existing power structure and found superior to all of them. That is the definition of political supremacy. In this reading, Professor Oak is not just a researcher. He is a kingmaker, the person who decides which children get access to starter Pokémon, which children get Pokédexes, which children are equipped to enter the pipeline that leads to the top of the political structure. His apparent benevolence is also institutional selection. Not malicious, but not neutral either. Theory number 77. The Pokédex mission is surveillance, not science. Professor Oak sends you into the world with a Pokédex and asks you to fill it with data on every Pokémon you encounter. This is framed as scientific research, contributing to the collective understanding of Pokémon biology and distribution. Sweet, generous, educational. But consider what the Pokédex actually records. Not just species data, location data, where you encountered each Pokémon, how many you have caught, the personal details of a trainer's interactions with Pokémon across an entire region, all of it flowing back to Professor Oak's laboratory in Pallet Town. The theory says the Pokédex is a data collection program. The professor is not just studying Pokémon, he is mapping the region's Pokémon ecosystem in real time through the work of free child labor. Trainers who go out and do the field research without understanding that they are doing field research. The Pokédex's cheerful interface, its sense of accomplishment as entries are filled, its complete normalcy within the world. These are what a very effective data collection instrument looks like when it's working. The theory does not need Professor Oak to be villainous for this to be true. He may genuinely want the data for science, but the data he is collecting is the kind of data that has value far beyond individual academic papers. Theory number 78. The reason starter Pokémon cannot be found in the wild is that they have been selectively removed, not that they are rare. The starter Pokémon of the Kanto region, Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, are not found anywhere in the wild in the original games. You receive exactly one each from Professor Oak, and the only other way to obtain them is through trades with other players. They are nowhere in the ecosystem. The theory says they were not always this way, that there was a time before the war, before the Reconstruction, before the current institutional arrangement, when Bulbasaur played in meadows and Charmander lived near volcanoes and Squirtle swam in rivers. They were present in the world the way Rattata and Pidgey are present, common, catchable, part of the background. And then someone collected them, systematically, brought them into Professor Oak's program, where they are now controlled and distributed to specific trainers at the specific age of 10, as the first step in the official pathway toward the Pokémon League. Why may? The theory has several versions. The most interesting one says it was done to ensure that the most capable and versatile Pokémon were available specifically to the trainers being recruited into the Pokémon League system, that having a high-quality starter is a prerequisite for competitive success, and the program ensures that the trainers who go through official channels are properly equipped. It is, under this reading, a meritocracy, but one that decides who gets access to the tools of merit before the competition begins. Theory number 79. The Sylph Company is not a technology company. It is a weapons manufacturer that markets its products as utilities. The Sylph Company produces the Master Ball, the only Pokeball guaranteed to catch any Pokemon without fail. It produces Sylph Scopes, which reveal the true identities of hidden Pokemon. It produces the Pokegear, wearable technology with communication capabilities. Its headquarters in Saffron City is the largest building in the Kanto region. Giovanni wants to take over the Sylph Company to mass-produce Master Balls for Team Rocket. This implies that the Sylph Company already has the capability to produce them, but limits production deliberately. Why would a company limit production of a product that would clearly be in enormous demand? The theory says because mass production of Master Balls would destabilize the world. A Master Ball guarantees capture. Legendary Pokémon, which exist in single instances in the wild, would be caught and controlled by whoever could acquire a Master Ball. The balance of power in the Pokémon world is maintained, in part, by the fact that legendary Pokémon are extraordinarily difficult to capture, that you might encounter one but cannot be sure of keeping it. The Master Ball breaks that equation entirely. Sylph Company keeps production limited, not because they cannot scale it, but because they understand what unlimited Master Ball distribution would do to the world. They are sitting on a weapon they have chosen not to deploy at scale. And Giovanni knows this, and wants the weapon. Theory number 80. The Pokémon Centers are operated by the same organization that runs the gyms, and neither one is quite what it appears. The theory asks a question that the games never bother to address. Who funds the Pokémon Centers? Nurse Joy heals your Pokémon for free. Every time. Immediately. In every city, in every route, in every corner of every region. The equipment is sophisticated. The staff never sleeps. The lights are always on. This is not a charitable service. This is a network of enormous financial and logistical scale, and someone is paying for it. The theory says the same organization that administers the Pokémon League, the same body that sanctions gym battles and certifies badge recipients and runs the championship, also runs the centers. They are not separate institutions that happen to both involve Pokémon. They are two arms of the same system. The centers are free because the league needs trainers healthy and mobile. Injured trainers cannot challenge gyms. Weakened Pokémon cannot advance the data collection mission. The centers are an investment in the pipeline, a subsidy to ensure the system keeps generating champions and champions in training, and the whole apparatus keeps running. The kindness is real. Nurse Joy genuinely cares, but the structure that places her in every city and funds her work is not altruistic at its root. Theory number 81. Team Rocket is not disorganized crime. It is a shadow government that has been operating longer than the League itself. Giovanni's organization controls game corners in multiple cities. It has infiltrated the Sylph Company, the largest technology firm in the region. It has agents in the Pokémon Tower, a religious and cultural institution. It has a gym leader as its public face. Its intelligence network is sophisticated enough to track a 10-year-old trainer across multiple regions. This is not a crime family. This is a state. The theory proposes that Team Rocket predates the current institutional arrangement in Kanto, that it was, at some point, the dominant power in the region, that the war the theory has been circling since the beginning was, at least in part, Team Rocket's consolidation of power, or its attempt at such consolidation. That the current arrangement, with the League at the top and Team Rocket as an underground adversary, is the result of Team Rocket losing that war. Not entirely, but enough. Giovanni still holds a gym. He still walks around in public. He has not been arrested. His organization operates openly enough that every trainer in the region knows his game corner in Celadon is crooked. The theory says the reason he has not been stopped is that the institutional structures that would stop him are either too damaged, too entangled with him, or too aware of what it would cost to try. He is not a criminal hiding from the law. He is a power in parallel with the law, tolerated because removing him would be more destabilizing than managing him. Theory number 82. The Pokémon world's complete absence of real-world religious institutions is because Arceus fulfills that function. And everyone knows it. In our world, cities have churches, temples, mosques, shrines. Civic life has spiritual architecture. The Pokémon world, which has no shortage of architecture, has essentially none of this. No churches in Pallet Town. No temples in Cerulean City. The notable spiritual spaces, the Pokémon Tower, the ruins of Alph, the Sprout Tower, are all Pokémon adjacent, related to the creatures themselves, rather than to any human-constructed cosmology. The theory says this is because in the Pokémon world, the divine is not a matter of faith. It is a matter of encountered fact. Arceus is real. Ho-Oh is real. Lugia is real. The creator of the universe can be found at the top of a mountain if you have the right item. The god of death has a domain. The legendary beasts run through the fields. When the divine is empirically verifiable, you don't need faith. You don't need institutions built around the hope that something greater than yourself exists, because the something greater than yourself occasionally walks past your house. The absence of religious institutions in the Pokémon world is not an oversight. It is a consequence of a world where the sacred keeps showing up in person. Section 14. The Last Mysteries. Theories about the franchise itself. These are the meta-theories, the ones that step back from the fictional world and look at the relationship between that world and the real one, between the creators and what they created, between the players and what they played. Theory number 83. Game Freak has been leaving breadcrumbs toward a unified lore for 30 years that they may never fully draw together. Pokémon Gold and Silver revealed that the Kanto games took place 3 years before the Johto games. This is the first indication that the games exist in a shared continuity, a connected timeline, a world with a history that moves forward. The revelation was small, almost casual, a single detail that opened a door to something much larger. Since then, the franchise has layered in connections. The Ore games are set in a desert region that seems separated from the main regions in ways that suggest decades of divergence. The Distortion world hints at a dimension adjacent to the main one. Pokémon Black and White introduced time travel adjacency through the legendary Pokémon. Sun and Moon confirm alternate timelines. Legends. Arceus takes place in the past of the Sinnoh region. There is a chronology, there is a cosmology. It is enormous and complicated and has been assembled across 30 years of games made by different teams with different priorities. The theory says Game Freak knows what the full picture looks like. They have a document somewhere, a map or a timeline, or a lore Bible that shows how all of it connects. And they have been placing pieces of it into games for 3 decades, trusting that the fanbase will find them. Whether they ever intend to show the full map, that is the question the theory leaves open. Theory number 84. The original 151 Pokémon were designed as a complete ecological system, and every subsequent generation is the system expanding as the world heals. The Kanto region was designed with 151 species. Critics noted early on that 151 is a strange number. Not a round 100, not a clean 200. The theory says 151 is not arbitrary. It is the number of species that survived whatever catastrophe the nuclear war theory describes. The original ecological baseline of the Pokémon world, reduced to its minimum viable set. Every generation since has added species. Gold and Silver brought the number above 200. Each subsequent generation has expanded it further. The Pokémon world is, under this theory, an ecosystem recovering. Species that were wiped out, or that never survived to the first games, gradually being rediscovered, emerging from remote habitats, developing from surviving populations. The discovery of new Pokémon in each new region is not Game Freak adding creatures. It is the world's biodiversity reasserting itself. Theory number 85. The reason every generation of games features a 10-year-old protagonist is that 10 is the age at which something specific happens to humans in the Pokémon world. In the real world, 10 is approximately the age at which children begin to develop abstract reasoning, to think in more complex ways about systems and consequences, to become capable of the kind of sustained strategic thinking that Pokémon battling requires. It is also roughly the threshold between early childhood and pre-adolescence, a transitional year. The theory proposes that in the Pokémon world, 10 is not just a cultural convention, it is biologically significant. That at 10 years old, humans in this world develop the capacity to form the specific kind of bond with Pokémon that makes effective training possible. Younger children cannot do it. The connection doesn't take. Older people who have never trained find the bond harder to establish, less intuitive, more effortful. The 10-year journey is not a coming-of-age story shaped by cultural tradition. It is a coming-of-age story shaped by the biology of a world in which the relationship between humans and Pokémon is literally neurologically contingent on developmental stage. You start at 10 because 10 is the only time you can. Theory number 86. Every Pokémon that has ever been your partner remembers you. The games don't maintain cross-generation memory in any mechanical sense. When you migrate Pokémon from one game to another, their stats and moves carry over. But their experience of what happened in the previous game does not. At least not in any way the game models. The theory says it does anyway. Not in a way the game shows you. Not in a way you can verify by checking a status screen. But in the way that living things carry experience. In the body, in the reflexes, in the particular quality of attention they bring to familiar situations. The Charizard you raised and read and eventually migrated to a later generation carries something it cannot describe. A sense of routes it has walked, of battles it fought, of a trainer who was there before and is not there now. It does not know where that trainer went, but it has not forgotten them. Your Pokémon carry you with them, even across the border between one game and another, even into games you have not played yet and never will. You leave a mark on them, and the mark persists. Theory number 87. The shiny Pokémon phenomenon is the Pokémon world's equivalent of genetic mutation, and shinies are specifically descended from Pokémon that survived nuclear exposure. One of the most discussed origins theories for shiny Pokémon involves the nuclear war timeline. If a significant portion of the Pokémon world's biology was affected by radiation from a large-scale nuclear event, then genetic variation in the surviving population would be higher than baseline. The unusual colorations we identify as shiny variants are, under this theory, the visible expression of radiation-induced genetic diversity. Not harmful mutations, but aesthetic ones, the kind that survived and persisted through generations. The first shiny Pokémon players ever encountered was the red Gyarados at the Lake of Rage in Gold and Silver. It was not random. It was specific. There was one at a fixed location, and it was there every time. The theory says this is because the conditions that produced shiny coloration in that population were localized. Specific to the Lake of Rage's water chemistry, its history, whatever events occurred in or near that lake that resulted in a Gyarados with red scales rather than blue. The lake remembers something, and the Gyarados wears it on its scales. Theory number 88. Pokémon music is not incidental. It is communicating emotional truth about each location. The music of the Pokémon games is compositionally sophisticated in ways that many players absorbed without fully analyzing. Each town's theme was designed to establish a specific emotional climate. Pallet Town's theme is nostalgic and small-sounding, because it is the place you always carry with you. Lavender Town's theme is unsettled and non-resolving, because the place holds something that cannot find peace. The Pokémon Center music, the same cheerful loop in every game for decades, is designed to make you feel safe. Because you are meant to feel safe here, this is the place where things are restored. The theory says this was not just good game design, it was intention at a level so precise that the music functions as a second layer of the game's narrative, a track of emotional information running parallel to the visual story, communicating things the dialogue and the Pokédex entries do not say. When you enter Lavender Town and the music changes, the game is not just setting an atmosphere, it is telling you something true about the place before a single word of plot unfolds. The music knows. It arrived there ahead of you and learned the shape of what happened, and it is playing back what it found. Theory number 89. The reason the Pokémon franchise has never resolved its biggest mysteries is that Game Freak understands that the mysteries are the product. The answered question is less valuable than the open one. If Game Freak confirmed that Ditto is a failed Mew clone, the theory dies. It becomes trivia instead of wonder. If the Pokémon War is made explicit in a future game, with dates and names and causes and outcomes, the vast creative space that the theory currently inhabits collapses into a single authorized account. The franchise has been extraordinarily careful about which questions it answers and which it leaves breathing. The Cubone/Kangaskhan connection was teased at in Let's Go, almost confirmed in Alolan lore, but not quite. The Gengar/Clefable theory received the Valentine's Day image, but no explicit statement. The war received confirmation of its existence, but no detail that would close down speculation. This is not accident. This is the franchise managing its relationship with its fandom with great care. The theories are a feature. They are part of what keeps the community alive between game releases, what brings people back to decade-old games and finds new things in them, what generates the kind of sustained engagement that a franchise needs to last 30 years without growing stale. Every unanswered question is an invitation, and Game Freak has been extending invitations for 30 years. Theory number 90. The player character and the rival in Red and Blue are not friends who grew up together. They are two sides of the same person. Red and Blue begin in the same town, grow up in the same houses, are given Pokémon by the same professor at the same time. They are parallel starts. They travel the same circuit, challenge the same gyms, face the same story. The theory says this mirroring is not coincidence, that Red and Blue are constructed as shadow selves, as two expressions of the same basic human drive, diverging from a single point into two different philosophies of growth. Red is the quiet, contemplative, internally focused approach. He never speaks, he acts, he becomes. Blue is the external, competitive, achievement-focused approach. He talks, he challenges, he measures himself against others constantly. Neither is wrong, neither is right. They are the two ways the same journey can be taken, and the game holds them in parallel until the very end of the story, when they meet at the summit and Red beats Blue, and the game has made its quiet argument about which approach matters more. But not by much. Blue was good too. He got there, didn't he? He climbed the same mountain. Section 15. Theories of Love. What the franchise has always been about. And now, finally, the theories that are not dark at all. Because not every conspiracy theory about Pokémon is about war and death and the horror hidden beneath the surface. Some of them are about something gentler, about what the franchise has always been at its most honest and its most basic. Theory number 91. Pokémon is a story about grief, told in a way children can absorb without being hurt by it. Look at the central emotional experiences the franchise keeps returning to. Cubone and its mother, Marowak and her child, Ash's Butterfree leaving, Ash releasing his Charizard, Brock leaving, Misty leaving, the end of every region, every companion, every chapter. The farewells that are not quite permanent, but feel like they might be. The theory is that the franchise has always been about the practice of loss, about learning to love things and then let them go, about the bone-deep understanding that every partnership ends, every journey has a last step, every Pokémon that feels like yours is temporarily yours, because everything is temporary, and that is not a reason not to love it. That is the reason to love it more completely while you have it. Children who grew up with Pokémon practiced grief with these creatures. They learned what it felt like to invest completely and then release. They learned that goodbye does not mean gone. They learned that what you loved still matters after it has passed out of your immediate care. These are not small lessons. These are the central lessons of being alive. And the franchise gave them to an entire generation in the form of cartoon monsters and pixelated farewells, in a form soft enough that children could receive them without flinching. Theory number 92. Every Pokémon that has ever been in your party genuinely loves you. Not as a game mechanic, but as the truth of what the franchise is trying to say. The friendship mechanic in the games is numerical. You can see it on a scale. Certain evolutions require it to reach a specific threshold. It is, mechanically, a variable. But the theory says the mechanic is not what is being communicated. The mechanic is the game's inadequate attempt to model something that it cannot fully capture in numbers. What is being communicated, what the franchise has been saying since its first iteration, is that the creatures in your party are not tools. They are not resources. They are not combat units waiting to be deployed. They are companions. They are with you. And the word "with" in the Pokémon franchise carries more weight than it usually does because these creatures have given up the wild for this. They have chosen the ball and the party and the trainer who sometimes makes wrong decisions, and they have kept choosing it every time they were given a chance to run. Theory number 93. Satoshi Tajiri built Pokémon as a way to give every child the experience he had catching bugs as a child, the wonder of finding something alive in an unexpected place. This is the origin story, and it deserves to be included here as a theory about what the franchise was always reaching for. Tajiri grew up in a suburb of Tokyo that was, in his childhood, surrounded by fields and Pokémon, and the kind of natural environment where a child could spend hours with a net and a jar and come home with something extraordinary. He collected insects. He found in the act of catching and collecting a sense of discovery and ownership and wonder that was deeply formative. And then he watched that environment change. As he grew up, the fields were built over. The ponds were drained. The places where a child could go to find something alive were replaced by concrete. The experience he had loved was being removed from the world. Pokémon is his attempt to give that experience back. To create a world where every patch of grass holds something surprising. Where the act of seeking and finding and making a companion of what you find is not only possible but central to the entire structure of life. Where the wonder of discovering a creature in an unexpected place is not a vanishing childhood memory, but the ongoing renewable core of the game. Every child who has ever felt their heart rate increase at the rustling of tall grass, every person who has held their breath watching a Pokémon circle around a safari ball, has experienced, for a moment, something of what Tajiri felt in the fields that are not there anymore. He built a world to keep that feeling alive, and it has kept it alive for 30 years. Theory number 94. The bond between trainer and Pokémon is the franchise's ongoing argument that love is an act of consistent choice. Your Pokémon did not have to be yours. Wild Pokémon did not volunteer to be caught, or if they did, the game is not explicit about that. The Pokémon in your party could, if their capability allowed it, leave. Some do. Charizard's arc in the anime is explicitly about a Pokémon that has become powerful enough to do what it wants, which includes ignoring the trainer entirely until the trainer does something that earns a different response. The franchise's consistent message, threaded through every game and every episode and every card, is that the bond between trainer and Pokémon is not automatic. It is not given. It is built through attention and care and the accumulation of shared experience until it becomes something that both parties actively choose to maintain. This is the franchise's argument I meant about love, not the grand lightning strike version. The daily, renewed, slightly effortful version. The version that requires you to show up and keep showing up. Theory number 95. Professor Oak's Pokédex mission is really a coming-of-age task designed not to collect data, but to teach you what the world contains. The task seems impossible. Catch all 151 Pokémon, document them, complete the Pokédex. You cannot do it alone. Some require in-game trades. Some are version exclusive. The task is, structurally, designed to require help, to be completable only in connection with others, only by reaching out, only by sharing. The theory says this is the whole point. Oak doesn't need the data. He has decades of his own research. He does not actually require a 10-year-old to complete his academic record. He needs the 10-year-old to learn something, to learn that the world is bigger than one person's vision of it, that you will encounter things in the tall grass that surprise you completely, that some of what you seek cannot be found alone, that the act of documenting the world, of paying close attention to every creature you encounter, of writing it down, of saying, this exists, and I found it, is itself a form of care for the world. The Pokédex is not a research tool, it is a curriculum. Section 16. The Final 30. Rapid-fire theories for the late hours. You are still here. It is late. The theories have been coming for a long time, and there are 30 more, and we are going to move through them with a softer touch, shorter, each one, but no less interesting for being brief. Let them drift past you like images in that almost asleep space where thoughts move freely. Theory number 96. The magnet train between Kanto and Johto was built after the war as a symbol of reconciliation, the first infrastructure project in the region explicitly designed to connect rather than fortify. Theory number 97. The ruins of Alph and every similar ancient ruin in the Pokémon world are the remnants of an earlier civilization that existed before the current human culture, one that understood Pokémon in a fundamentally different way, that lived alongside them without the trainer capture system, and that fell because it gave too much power to the unknown and could not contain what was released. Theory number 98. Misty's bike, which Ash's Pikachu destroyed in the first episode of the anime, and which is the ostensible reason Misty accompanies Ash through the whole of the Kanto and Orange Islands journey, was never really about the bike. She stayed because she wanted to. The bike is the excuse she gave herself when the real reason would have been harder to name. Theory number 99. The Pokemon world has a concept of death that the games only approach obliquely. Through the ghost Pokemon, through the Pokemon Tower, through the dark Pokédex entries. And the reason it is approached obliquely is that in a world where Pokemon centers can restore a fainted Pokemon instantly, the nature of death is philosophically unclear even to the people living there. They are not sure whether the Pokemon that come back from a faint have died and been revived. They are not sure whether the ghost Pokemon are all that remains of something or a continuation of it. Death is a question they have not resolved, so they deal with it gently, at the edges, in Lavender Town music and gravesite visits. Theory number 100. The game Pokémon Snap, in which you take photographs of Pokémon in their natural habitats and no battling occurs, is the closest the franchise has ever come to showing you the Pokémon world as it exists without human intervention. And the theory says it is deeply, genuinely beautiful in a way the main games cannot quite match, because the creatures in Snap are not looking at you like opponents. They are just living. Theory number 101. The character Silver in Gold and Silver, the dark-haired rival who steals his starter Pokemon, who despises weakness, who has a furious contempt for trainers who treat their Pokemon as friends, is Giovanni's son. This is very nearly confirmed in the games themselves. The theory says Silver's harshness is the product of having been raised by a man who sees Pokemon as tools and people as obstacles, and his eventual softening, his gradual recognition that what he was taught was wrong, is one of the quietly most moving arcs in the franchise. The son of the villain finding his way to something better. Theory number 102. The Saffron City police were bribed by Team Rocket to look the other way during the invasion of the Sylph Company. This is supported by the fact that when you try to enter the city before a certain point in the story, the guards will accept a simple beverage as a reason to let you pass. Guards that will wave someone through for a drink are guards that can be bought. And if they can be bought by a trainer with pocket change, they can certainly be bought by an organized crime network. Theory number 103. Pokemon Colosseum's protagonist Wes, who begins the game by blowing up Team Snag'em's base and stealing an experimental device, is not a hero who decided to switch sides. He is someone who got what he needed from Team Snag'em and then removed them as a variable in a plan he had been developing independently for a long time. He is not a reluctant protagonist. He is competent and deliberate, and the hero framing the narrative places on him is something he is mildly amused by. Theory number 104. The reason Brock's eyes are always closed in the anime is that he was protecting others. Brock is described across his entire arc as the responsible one, the caretaker, the person who makes sure everyone eats and sleeps and doesn't do something irreversible. The theory says this is connected, that Brock's perpetually narrowed expression is the face of someone who is deliberately making himself less threatening, less imposing, more approachable so that the people around him feel safe. He is managing his presence the same way he manages their camp, quietly, carefully, always thinking ahead. Theory number 105. Dragonite exists in a population that is vastly larger than the games ever show you. The anime depicted a Dragonite owned by the Warden of the Safari Zone in an episode that was never aired internationally, which meant that Western audiences experienced Dragonite as far rarer and more mythical than Japanese audiences did. This discrepancy in perceived rarity shaped the fandom's understanding of Dragonite for years, and the fan community effectively generated a different Dragonite lore in the West than in Japan based on what content they had access to. Theory number 106. Jolton, Vaporeon, and Flareon, the original three evolutions, represent the three great types of power in Kanto's pre-war society: electrical power, water management, and fire. The three most essential resources of any developing civilization. Eevee, which can become any of them, represents the generational choice each family makes about which kind of power they will serve. Theory number 107. The Pokemon world has no regular birds, but its sky is full of Pokemon that fill bird-shaped niches. This is because, under the nuclear war reading of the world, Birds were among the most sensitive species to the environmental catastrophe that preceded the current world. They died in enormous numbers. The species that replaced them, Pidgey and Spiro and Firo and all the others, are what survived and changed. They are birds that became something more than birds, descended from the last flocks that outlasted the fire. Theory number 108. Poliwhirl and its branching evolution path, Poliwrath. If you use a water stone, Politoad, if you trade it holding a king's rock, represents a genuine fork in the developmental path, and the theory says these are not just two forms of the same Pokémon. They are two distinct life paths that only exist in potential until the circumstances of the individual's life close one door and open another. Poliwrath became a warrior because a warrior's choice was made. Politoad became a leader because a different choice was made. The Pokémon did not choose. The environment did. Theory number 109. The reason the rival in the most recent games is always so much gentler, so much more immediately friendly than Gary or Silver, is that the franchise is aging alongside its players, and the aggression that made early rivalry feel like genuine challenge has given way to a more collaborative framing, because the people who loved those early games are now old enough to understand that the real rival is always yourself. Theory number 110. Celebi, the time-traveling Pokémon, has visited every major event in Pokémon history, not as a participant, but as a witness. It was present for the war. It was present for the founding of the League. It was present for the Cinnabar Island experiments, and for the birth of Mewtwo, and for the first day Ash walked out of Pallet Town. It has seen everything. And it returns to the present, carrying the weight of knowing, which is why Celebi looks the way it does. Ancient and childlike simultaneously, a creature that has lived all of time and still appears impossibly young. Theory number 111. The player character of every generation is related to the player character of the previous one. Not as direct relatives, necessarily, but as part of a lineage. A family tradition of going out into the world with Pokémon. The grandfather who walked the Kanto circuit passes the impulse to the parent who encourages the child to do the same, who grows up and watches their own child walk into the tall grass for the first time. The Pokédex passes down. The instinct passes down. The love passes down. Theory number 112. The original trading mechanic in Red and Blue, the requirement to trade certain Pokémon to evolve them, was not just a technical solution to getting players to interact. It was a deliberate design statement. Some growth can only happen in relationship. Some things cannot become what they are supposed to be until they move through another person's world and come back changed by the journey. Theory number 113. Every legendary Pokémon has a partner, a human or a Pokémon, somewhere in the world that it is bonded to at a level the games do not fully model. Lugia has someone. Rayquaza has someone. Zygarde has something it is protecting that is not the abstract concept of the ecosystem, but a specific, personal, irreplaceable something. Legendary Pokémon are not alone. They are just bonded to things we are not shown. Theory number 114. The Pokémon anime's ending theme, Meowth's Party, which played over credits in the Japanese release, is Meowth describing what he truly wants. Not to be valued by Giovanni, not to be a Team Rocket agent, but to have a party, to be included, to belong somewhere cheerful and warm and full of other creatures who are glad he is there. The party in the song is the thing he was always looking for and could not quite find through the paths he chose to look for it. Theory number 115. The game mechanic of breeding Pokémon. At the daycare creates something ethically interesting when you think about it carefully. Two Pokémon left together produce an egg. That egg hatches into a new creature. The daycare couple is cheerful about this, but the breeding Pokémon are not asked. Their offspring are given to whoever drops them off. The theory is not that this is monstrous. It is that it is exactly as ethically complex as similar practices in the real world, and the franchise has been quietly sitting with that complexity since Generation 2. Theory number 116. The color red that the player character wears in the original games was a deliberate choice that connects visually to the color of Pokeballs, Charizard's fire, the standard Magikarp at sunset, Gyarados' eyes, and a dozen other significant red objects in the franchise. Red wears red because red is the story, the color the franchise tells itself in, the primary color of its identity. Theory number 117. The reason Team Rocket's Meowth learned to talk, within the fiction of the anime, is not simply a plot device. The story of how Meowth learned, teaching himself human speech to impress a female Meowth who wanted to be with a human rather than a Pokémon, is one of the franchise's most quietly devastating origin stories. He became what he became, abandoned his nature as a Pokémon, shaped himself into something human adjacent for the chance at love, and was rejected anyway, and kept the language, and carries it with him like a scar every episode forever. Theory number 118. Pikachu's consistent refusal to evolve into Raichu is not stubbornness and it is not programming. It is identity. Pikachu has seen what evolution costs. It has watched Pokémon become more powerful and less themselves. It has decided in whatever way a Pikachu makes decisions that the specific shape it is, small and quick and loved exactly as it is worth more than the power it could gain by becoming something else. Pikachu's refusal is a philosophical position. It is the franchise's argument delivered quietly by its most iconic creature that growth is not always the direction you think it is. Theory number 119. The Ho-Oh that Ash sees in the first episode is the same Ho-Oh that appears at the end of the series, when Ash finally becomes world champion, and it has been following him the entire time, invisible, keeping the promise it made by flying over Pallet Town on a rainy morning when a boy looked up. Theory number 120. The Pokémon franchise has, across 30 years and 1,000 creatures in dozens of games and hundreds of episodes, been telling one story. One story, with many characters and many chapters, and many ways in, but always the same story. About the world being full of things more extraordinary than they first appear. About the partnership between a person and a creature as one of the purest forms of love available to any living being. About the willingness to set out from your small starting town without knowing what you'll find, trusting that the world will be worth walking. Theory number 121. The Pokémon who appear in your dreams, if you have ever had one, are not random. The franchise has been living in enough people long enough that the creatures have become part of the language the unconscious uses to process things. If you dream of Gengar, you are dreaming about a shadow you have not confronted. If you dream of a Magikarp, you are dreaming about potential that is not yet expressed. If you dream of a Pokémon Center, you are dreaming about rest, about the unconditional offer to be restored. Your sleeping mind has incorporated the franchise into its vocabulary, and it is fluent. Theory number 122. The reason every Pokémon game ends the same way. The champion defeated. The region at peace, the credits rolling, the player character standing in their hometown as if no time has passed, is that the franchise is describing a cycle, a loop, a journey that completes and begins again. You defeat the champion and you start again, on a new game, in a new region, as a new child. The journey does not accumulate across generations in a way that makes any individual journey less significant. Each one is whole. Theory number 123. Ash's final victory in the World Coronation Series, his achievement of the highest ranking, his recognition as the world's best trainer, was not the ending of his story. It was the completion of the first chapter. The story of becoming champion is the origin story of what comes after. We don't know what comes after, but the franchise has enough respect for the journey not to tell us yet. Theory number 124. Every player who has ever played a Pokémon game has, in some small way, contributed to the franchise's lore. Not through official channels, not through game mechanics, but through the specific stories they told themselves about their specific Pokémon. The Charizard you named and leveled to 100. The Nidoking that carried you through the Elite Four when nothing else could. The Jolteon you traded someone in the schoolyard and always wondered what happened to it. These stories are not in any game. They are real anyway. The franchise created a space for them, and they grew. Theory number 125, Pokémon will outlast us. Not the company, not the mechanics, not the specific iteration of any generation's graphics or features. But the idea. The idea of a world full of creatures more extraordinary than they appear, waiting in the long grass, ready to become companions to anyone who is patient and kind enough to reach out a hand. The idea that the journey is worth taking. The idea that something small and electric and fierce can love you back in a way that changes the shape of your life. This idea is old now. It has been in the world for 30 years. It has been absorbed into the imagination of a generation of people who are now adults, who carry it forward in the way humans carry things that mattered when they were forming. Not consciously, not as nostalgia, but as the texture of how they think about partnership and patience and the willingness to go out into uncertain places with someone by your side. It will keep going. There is always more tall grass. There is always something waiting in it. You made it. 125 theories and you're still here. That means something. If you enjoyed this and you want to wake up tomorrow to more exactly like it, hit subscribe. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps. Leave a comment below with which theory hit you the hardest or which one you're going to be thinking about tomorrow. I read every single one. Thank you for being here tonight, for staying this long, for caring about a franchise that, at its heart, has always been about the same thing, going out into the world and finding something to love. The Pokemon Center music is playing somewhere. You're restored. Good night.